OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
7:30 on this Thursday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Eoin and Ger with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. We've got State of the Union later, as ever, from 9 o'clock. Johne Murphy and Steve Rooney will be alongside Ger and Keith for that. We've got Gina Akpe Moses and Joseph Ojewumi with us as well at around 8:30 this morning. They're going to be talking about their experiences of racism in Ireland. We've got Michael Fennelly with us as well, of course, the Offaly manager, now retired Ballyhale Shamrocks hurler. So it's a fairly busy morning. You can get in touch by commenting on the stream or tweeting us at Off The Ball. Ger Gilroy, very good morning to you.
Hiya, nice shirt.
Thank you very much. Oh, we didn't twin it this week. You didn't send the memo. You went for the red shirt again this week, and I didn't. That's I'm sorry to let this eye down.
How many check shirts can any grown man actually have?
On Thursdays, we wear red, I think is the exact line that we're looking for here. I've been meaning to ask you for the last couple of mornings, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sick of Netflix are you at this point?
Yeah, I think I finished it a couple of weeks ago, pretty much.
See, I haven't come anywhere close to finishing Netflix. I finished season 2 of Ozark, was the last thing I did, and it was great. And then I was like, that's it, I'm done.
Season 3?
No, just can't be bothered with it. I've got Curb Your Enthusiasm going on Now TV at the moment, which obviously is just a better TV show in general. But I just don't feel the need to delve into a big, long storyline, something to binge on at the moment. I'm not sure, is it the good weather? Even when the rain was lashing down yesterday, I wasn't like, okay, now it's time to start streaming again. I'm done with it. I think the peak Netflix phase in our lives was the start of lockdown, and now it's over and done with.
Yeah, because football's coming back. That's it. You're just preparing yourself. This is the pre-season now. That'll wean yourself off any addiction to any ancillary outside activities that might in any way distract you from knowing who the best left back for your fantasy football team is.
It's a good point. It's true. Fantasy football should actually be starting afresh. I think they should start brand new leagues and all that sort of thing. But like the other weird habits that we picked up during lockdown haven't exactly gone anywhere. Like, I mean, we're all still putting in hours of effort into our cooking and seasoning everything, even though nothing needs to be seasoned. And people are probably still making banana bread here. I just think that people have started to watch a little bit less of Netflix is my entire point.
Well, look, it's going to be very interesting to see if the Sport Ireland Athletics Monitor comes back and says everybody was really active for the first period, and then the lockdown started to ease and everybody went, it's grand, I don't need to do all this exercise, the crisis is over, hooray. People are returning to normal is essentially what you're saying, and you're getting back to a normal level of not completely addicted to Netflix.
Well, that's an actual serious point you've stumbled upon there, that this could actually be the byproduct of it, that we actually stumble into, I don't know, the peak house party era in a month's time, whenever that July 20 restriction comes, and people just go mental, but not in pubs and bars, and maybe it's the end of our society as we knew it for 2 months.
I await with bated breath the stories of excess that happen at house parties in July. You can only imagine the type of shenanigans that Irish people are going to get up to in their drunken revelry as they make up for 5 months of being denied the sesh with the almighty sesh to end all sessions. And
then that one weekend, everybody will wake up on Monday and be like, I'm actually done with the sesh. And maybe that'll just have another spike in exercise, and it'll just be an up and down roller coaster for the rest of the year.
We like to binge.
That's how these things work. Just to recap on what's coming up this morning, we've got Shane Hannon coming your way at around 8:10. The sports pages, plenty happening in there this morning, including a new proximity study providing a shot in the arm for a return to action in Gaelic games. That's how they read it in the Irish Times anyway. As I say, we've got a couple of Irish athletes with us later on as well. Gina Akpe Moses and Joseph Ojewumi talking about their experiences with racism in Ireland. Michael Fennelly, the Offaly boss, will be with us at 10:09. And as I say, Keith Wood's State of the Union coming up at 9:10. First though, let's hear from Andy Dunn. He joined Joe last night for a brilliant interview. Have a listen.
Very happy to welcome Mr. Andy Dunn, who is a regular pundit. We have bullied you, coerced you into giving a career interview chat. Andy Dunn, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Joe. Nice to be back. Not quite sure why you want to do a career interview, but
Well, I know JP was on to you and said he wanted to. We were going to talk to you about your career, and you weren't quite sure if we wanted to talk to you about your career in physical therapy with Personal Health, which is your clinic in Rathmines, or your rugby career. And he said rugby career, and I understand you sent back emojis of laughing, crying face at the ridiculousness of that thought.
Well, it's a long while ago. It's hardly current. It's finished 11 seasons ago. So you're digging up a bit of old history. So,
well, here's the point. I don't know much about your career. I haven't even talked to you about it off air in very much detail at any stage, because I remember where I first encountered you was when we might as well be truthful with each other here. This is a truth and reconciliation situation with me and you. So,
like it is.
Yeah, let's just do it like it is. And we had a Heineken Champions Cup game, and there was a late dropout on co-commentary duty, and Dave McIntyre was frantically trying to find somebody. And last minute, he said Andy Dunn, and I was like, Andy Dunn, yeah. And I'd be lying if I said I saw a lot of your career. You know, that would be just a total lie. And then, whoom, you jump in and do a sterling job as a pundit, and you know the people go wild, and you're with us ever since. But so that is half the thing here. So I know Leinster 01 to 03. 11 appearances. I know I want to get behind the numbers. Leinster 01 to 03, 11 appearances. Harlequins 03 to 05, 56 appearances. And I know you did kick the winning kick in the Challenge Cup final. Back to Leinster for a season, and then Connacht 07 to 10. And then you retire going on 30. And just like that, a 10-year career shoots by. So to go behind the numbers a little bit, what I do certainly know is that in school in particular, you were regarded as a very serious prospect. There was every belief when you were 15 or 16 in Belvedere, I think, that there was a very good chance you would be the Irish number 10 for a certain period of time. Was that how you saw things? Did you regard yourself as a pretty serious prospect and operating at that level, hopefully?
I think when I left school, I did, which actually was an issue. I thought myself slightly too much of a prospect. When you're young and innocent, and I probably still am to a degree, and a bit naive, even though I've turned 40. But at 15, 16, 17, I was hugely, hugely driven. And my work ethic was through the roof. And my goal at that stage was to get on the Irish under-18s and the Irish school side. And I did. And I played with Paul O'Connell and O'Driscoll and lots of great players, Darcy, Donica O'Callaghan, lots of fellas who went on and really, really kind of their career went into the stratosphere in terms of how they represented Ireland over a long period. I think when I got to that point at 18, ironically, I had some private sense of achievement and satisfaction that I thought I had arrived. I'd proven my worth, and that actually at 19, 20, I didn't need to continue to prove myself because I'd already, in my own mind now, mistakenly felt, well, why isn't everyone making more of a fuss about me? You know, I got out of school, you're in the big bad world. I actually went into training straight away, actually, with Leinster. Darcy was given a contract almost straight out of school. We were on the same team in the same year. And Darcy got a contract, got a great try away in Clonettley Scarlets. Only a couple of months after finishing the Leaving Cert, and that doesn't happen a whole lot anymore. Fellas going straight into the Leinster squad. And then I was asked to go in straight away to the Leinster squad. And actually, with UCD at the time, a couple of people were advising me I was still a bit small physically, and they would have probably been right. So I actually held off. Mike Ruddock was keen for me to join. I suppose one thing people mightn't know about, well, lots of things people won't be aware about my career because it is a while ago, but I got an offer to go to Stade Francais about a month later, an actual contract offer, which I didn't take. And I'm still not sure if I regret that or not. Diego Dominguez, who was a legend of the game and an out half, was and someone I looked at really with great admiration was the starting 10 in Stade Francais, and John Connolly was their coach. And I'd come across John Connolly quite a bit at underage level. He was an Australian coach and he coached in the All-Ireland League. He coached all Belvedere, so he would have known of me coming through the school system in Belvedere College. So he was very Australian, Southern Hemisphere mentality. If you're good enough, you're old enough. And he didn't care that I was about 9.5 stone, wringing wet. And he just wanted to throw me in and sink or swim mentality. But again, I suppose I spoke to people who had, at the time, my best interest at heart and my own development. They had my best interest at heart. And they said, it's probably not the wisest move at 18.5 to just move to Paris and play, absolutely in with a view to going to back up and be a support to Dominguez, but to learn from him. So that didn't happen because I turned it down. So things could have been a slightly different, very different career had, for example, I'd gone to Paris and not sank, but I didn't go. So that was an initial turning point or fork in the road. So yeah, I went into that Leinster squad with a mix of, I think, a little bit of arrogance because the likes of Stade Francais had offered me a contract. I had also then somehow decided that it wasn't right for me to go into Leinster, but went in the following year. And in my own mind, when I reflect, I think there was a sense in my own naivety that I had arrived into the Leinster squad and therefore was going to get very close to starting on the team without having to maybe work as hard, ironically, as hard as I was working all through my teens. So yeah, that did affect me a little bit arriving into the squad. I don't think I had a bad attitude in terms of my outwardly how I projected things. I was got on well with the lads and the team and the coaches, and I worked reasonably hard, but I think I could have worked a lot harder,
It's interesting that you were in the same vintage coming through as Gordon Darcy, because he would say the same thing of his initial couple of years at Leinster. It was far from professional, the general setup. You were probably left to your own devices a touch. He missed out on the World Cup. He took his foot off the gas to such an extent, and that was the kick up the backside that he needed. So it's not shocking maybe to hear that was allowed to happen in a way it wouldn't be today. If I jump in at your second season, for instance, because I saw Peter O'Reilly picked out this game in the Sunday Times. So your second season at Leinster, Scarlets away, Warren Gatland is in the crowd. You have a sensational game by all accounts. I didn't see it, but an incredibly good game alongside Brian O'Driscoll and others. Scarlets undone is the headline in the local paper over in Wales. So, yeah, you could have had that should have been your go-to headline.
And the Western Mail, the next morning.
Western Mail, okay. Don't lie, it's up on your mirror still, let's be honest. And Gatlin invited you in, I think, to train with the Irish squad. So that's in your second season with Leinster, sometime around 02 or so. Is that when, that sounds like, okay, maybe you're not working as hard as you could have, or as driven as the schoolboy Andy Dunn. But that sounds like you've navigated a few bits and bobs and you're doing okay. Is it then that injury starts to kick in?
A little bit, yeah. I think that Clonettley game was, in my mind, over a 10-year professional career, that was the best 80 minutes I put together as an individual. But it's also one of the better games I put together as a director of the team strategy on the field. And it all fell into place. Sports people often talk about being in the zone and how vague that can sound, but it's as if in those moments everything is making sense, everything's falling into place, everything you touch is working. And I remember I was kicking off both feet. I'd got a drop goal from a really almost from the touchline, a really odd angle. I'd made a lot of line breaks, and I was also playing against Stephen Jones, who was a British Lion and Welsh international, and very much had left him in my wake. So this sense of I'm a precocious young talent, I've arrived. That didn't go away after that game. That's cemented in my mindset. I remember turning up to training on the following Monday, and the team was announced to play, I think, Swansea on the Tuesday, and I was dropped. And I was completely flummoxed. And again, it comes down to individual hardness, or how hard my outer shell was. I think it comes down to leadership in the group, that at the time, nobody, not a sinner on the squad came over and said, all right, look, but that's individual leadership. And Leinster at that stage was a very different place to how it is now. Similarly, nobody came over and gave me a kick up the arse, and nobody came over and said, well done, and nobody told me I wasn't picked. So you were kind of much the same as Gordon Darcy had slipped off and maybe not made the 99 World Cup. There was just a general silence to everything. So I tried to work things out for myself, and I felt a bit hard done by having, the game was on BBC and BBC Wales, and I got man of the match, and then you're dropped. But the only reason I was dropped in hindsight was the team was rotating and was early in the season, and I probably didn't react as professionally as I should, but I wasn't really a professional, and half of the team, I would say, weren't really professional in their mindset at that stage. So that definitely affected me, and probably affected my attention to detail or my drive in training, because I felt a bit hard done by as a young, talented player can if he's not communicated effectively with. So that took a little bit of a wind out of my sails, but I did continue and play a few more good games. I think we had a great game over against Bridgend, and that was a great Leinster side that had the likes of Emmett Byrne, Trevor Brennan, Peter Coyle, Malo Kelly, Liam Toland. We had Shane Horgan playing that day. Lots of Dennis Hickey. Very, very good side, and we beaten Bridgend. And I think I took my first serious injury a couple of weeks after that. Then I got a kind of an ankle ligament rupture, which required surgery. So that, unfortunately, was a bit of a chain of events. Then I spent the best part of the next 2 seasons really in and out of hospital getting surgeries. I got back. I was out for most of the rest of that season. The inaugural Celtic League win by Leinster against Munster in Lansdowne Road, I missed that final. I got injured about 2 weeks before. I would have been substitute to Nathan Spooner, who was a brilliant bloke, brilliant professional, and I was learning all the time from him. He'd come in from Australia. Matt Williams had brought him in. He was at the time he was the incumbent Australian out half. And I suppose he effectively gave that up to move up to the Northern Hemisphere. That a lot of fellas did at that stage to improve their take home. He would have earned a lot more money up in the Northern Hemisphere. So yeah, I learned from him, but then I got the injuries, and I was out rest of that season. When I got back the following season, I dislocated my shoulder. I think second game of the year up in Peebles up in Scotland, and surgery again. Things weren't as evolved medically. I think Rob Henshaw got back in 11 weeks from a similar surgery last 2 years. It took me about 4 or 5 months, so that was the best part of that season written off. So you get timing matters a lot in sport. Injury, luck, form, who you're surrounded by, your managers, your leaders, and most importantly, how you react to things yourself. And I think there was an element of self-pity, and there was an element of anger, and an element of drive to prove myself, all rolled into one at a very young age. So,
yes, which I can understand if you're the hotshot number 10 in school and you're making the international side, and Stade Francais are giving you a contract at the age of 18, and Leinster want you as well, and you put in some good performances. Warren Gatlin sees you come train with the Irish team. I can see how if 2-3 years then if it doesn't happen for you, you can find yourself in a pretty messy place.
Well, we had Matt Williams had some absolutely hilarious inputs, but he didn't mean to be, I don't think. But when we reflect on the team at the time, he'd some great anecdotes, he'd some stories. He was a great man for, I suppose, trying to illustrate his point through story. But he did do a very, at the time, probably felt a bit controversial. I think around in my second, third season, he asked every player to have a blank sheet. We all put it down on a desk or a table in the training camp with our name at the top, and every other player had free range to write a comment about you, and they could choose to initial it, they could choose to be anonymous, they could choose to be or identify themselves, and most fellas identified themselves. And I got a really nice complimentary sheet, except Keith Gleeson, who was an incredibly driven workhorse of an open side, and his dedication in training, he almost isolated himself from the squad by how disciplined he was. And at a time when a lot of the Leinster squad were not very disciplined, there was a good time Charlie type mentality about a lot of the team. There was a lot of socialising, there was a lot of boozing, there was a lot of late nights, and training ethos wasn't that great in the group. And Keith seemed to set a standard that was very separate. But I always remember he wrote, "You've got all the talent in the world, but something along the lines of, you'll never make it as long as your attitude towards work stays the way it is now." And that really, I probably took, and he signed it, fully signed it, and I took it as a slight. But I'd say it took me 4 or 5 years longer to let it sink in and realise he was bang on the money.
Come on, I have to stop you here, right? Without blowing smoke, you're one of the smartest people I talk to on a regular basis that we have in here. Articulate, you're like a free thinker and brilliant. How are you so thick at 23?
Good question. I think a lot of things went my way in the world of rugby, and my first taste of disappointment and injury and non-selection and loss of form and not being the lead guy, not having the team centred around me, I didn't know how to react. I'd never been in it before. So the talent hadn't deserted me. The work ethic had a little, but then in patches I would do something very good. And to me, I felt, well, I've proved myself. Why won't I get a shot next week? But you have to be doing it week in, week out, probably going unnoticed for weeks on end, and showing the coach, you need to put your trust in me. And I was a little bit in and out. And
it's so jarring to hear that now, because if you listen to the young Irish player or the young Leinster player now, they're like pre-programmed. It's like like robotic in terms of like, next game, I've done nothing, Grand Slam, put it behind me.
Yeah.
It's almost jarring to hear someone talk the way you're talking.
Well, they do amaze me. The first time I really saw it was when I'd been over to England. I'd had a great time there, and I ended up coming back for lots of different reasons. But I came back to Leinster in 06-07, and Luke Fitzgerald was just out of school and 18. And he seemed to know exactly what to say at the right time in a group session, in a training session with the coaches. On the media was really picking up its coverage at that stage and gaining momentum of rugby. And I couldn't quite fathom how an 18-year-old seemed to have the wherewithal he had just arrived in, and where was his five-year learning curve that I hadn't seen. But the game really wasn't professional around 98, 99. It was people were being paid. But, Leinster lads were training, they were getting Mars bars on the side of the field to fuel up, they were actually putting on weight while training, which was quite hard to do. But with 3 Mars bars in a fitness session, so kind of counts it out. But so there was a lot to learn for everyone.
No, I do accept it's such a different world. We're talking here to Andy Dunn, who's our guest on Wednesday Night Rugby, as opposed to our pundit. You're our guest this evening. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to
very indulgent. Yes.
Vodafone #TeamOfUs, everyone in as usual. So I know you went to Quins and won the Challenge Cup at the age of 24 and kicked the winning penalty in that, and you're coming under, I suppose, the influence of the likes of Will Greenwood. We did a little chat with him, and that's bound to be a good influence, and Jason Leonard. Although I seem to remember as well there were lots of donuts eaten, and I'm sure it wasn't perfect professionalism. No. But so you win the Challenge Cup at 24, things are moving for you a little bit. You say you come back to Leinster for a season. Do you get to a point from, Quins between 03 and 05, back to Leinster for a season, 06 to 07, and then on to Connacht, 07 to 10. Do you get to a point where you start to knuckle down, understand what it takes to be a pro, and get a run and play what you feel is your best rugby, or give an account of the player that you kind of had hoped you would be?
No, there's a really interesting little mid-story in the middle. So the second year with Quins, having won the Challenge Cup, Quins fell foul of, I think, their own ambition. They got rid of 13 of that squad. We won the Challenge Cup, and it's interesting. I'm looking at the Last Dance at the moment on Netflix, and the whole Jerry Krause trying to change the Chicago Bulls while they're successful. This is going to be their last game.
Are you Jordan? Is that who are you?
Yeah, but no, it's interesting why teams or franchises, some teams get very stagnant and try to, I suppose, wring out that J-cloth and get the very, very last bit out of their players, and they become an aged team.
Yeah.
And in the case of Harlequins, Harlequins hadn't had a season like that for about 6 seasons. We won a Challenge Cup. We finished 4th in the Premiership, and they got rid of 13 of the squad. They basically took out the bones of that squad.
Right.
And they didn't replace them smartly. In fact, they brought in quite a few duds, a couple of lads from Championship, and apparently it wasn't financial, it was just the coaching staff recruitment kind of bit awry. But Quins nosedived in that second season and ended up getting relegated. Now I played up until January of that season, and actually played my last game for Quins was in January against Munster in a full house in Twickenham, and Rob Henderson steamrolled me about 20 minutes into the game off a line out. I think Raj fed Rob Henderson, and he just steamrolled me and actually broke my foot. And there was no foul play. But I was so keen to just stay on the field because I'd been plagued by injury, and the 1 season and a half I'd had in Quins, kind of 1.5 years in, I hadn't had so much as a broken toenail. So I stayed on the field for about 60 minutes with a broken foot, and it was very stupid because I apparently caused a lot more damage by staying on when I needed a surgery. But lo and behold, I was ruled out for the season. Quins did nosedive. They had a much lesser. Their squad in general was a weaker squad that year, for the reasons I suggested. But then John Connolly, who tried to sign me back at 18 for Stade Francais, got the Bath job and straight back onto me. As these things happen, it was like Harry Redknapp always wanted to sign Jermaine Defoe or Peter Crouch. John Connolly always wanted to sign me, and second time around I said I'm gone. I did go in and chat to Mark Evans, and I said, what if I hang around? I do love it here. And he said, well, we're about to sign Andrew Mertens, so on your bike.
Okay.
So I went to Bath, and as I said, it was probably not that short a story. In my first 4 games for Bath, it went really well, but John Connolly got the Australian job and left, and the new coach came in and sat me down and said, you're not in my plans. And that's something that literally on a flick of a coin can happen. And that was a very character building thing to go through, because I was the starting 10 with one coach. The new guy came in and said, you're not figuring. So that was actually the most formative period in my career, because Bath, effectively, the new coach didn't want me there, and I was on a 2-year contract, but there was no personal vendetta. He just didn't want me there. So I trained the house down, having gone through my 5 or 6 years of learning how to be a professional. And ironically, where I almost was like a ghost over in Bath, I didn't feature in the matchday squad regularly. I trained like a Spartan for about 8 months just to prove to myself that I could be a professional. And I think Leinster were keen to get me back at that stage. They'd Felipe, but they didn't have a whole lot of strength and depth in the position. So I came home.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Saturday panel on Off the Ball. There's a growing hostility towards cyclists. We're somehow seen as a nuisance, when in fact we're just people trying to get to work.
I've never ever gotten one bad word said to me about my sexuality, or from the opposition, or from, actually in one bad times nearly, the girl was marking me so tightly, I was like, I have a girlfriend.
I'm not the person I was 10 years ago, and that doesn't worry me. I know I can play good enough golf.
Don't miss The Panel, every Saturday afternoon, only on Off the Ball.
OTB AM.
Yeah, just gone 8 o'clock on this Thursday morning. You're watching or listening to OTB AM. Andy Dunn is the voice you've just been listening to. He was speaking on last night's show. Great interview with Joe Malloy. The full piece available now on the OTB Podcast Network, on the brand new OTB Sports App, and on youtube.com/offtheball as well. Plenty more rugby coming up later on as well. After 9 o'clock, we've got Keith Wood's State of the Union. Schools and domestic rugby, Ger, I think, is up for discussion.
Yeah, so we've done international. We've been down speaking with Michael Cheika and Andrew Mertens, you've got to mention there. And we also obviously had Philip Brown last week. We've done the commercial stuff. We've done the strength of the club game in England and how that's really one of the big dominoes that still has to fall in terms of what's going to happen next in the whole CVC relationship. So we figured we'd talk about the role that the AIL has and the role that the schools have. And Johnny Murphy has obviously just taken Newbridge College to the Leinster Schools Cup final. Obviously they're going to share that because the game ended up being cancelled when lockdown happened, and he talks in depth about just the resources that the schools have, and they in Newbridge they have fairly phenomenal resources when he lists them off, but he said that they would kind of be considered a developmental school in terms of not being at the same level of resources as some of the big powerhouse schools who traditionally would be winning the Leinster Schools Cup and would traditionally be providing the backbone of the Leinster team and subsequently the Ireland team, as we've seen in recent years. And so when he begins to go through that level of detail, and it's for the junior team and the senior team, you realise that there's a massive industry in schools coaching. And then you just park that thought for a moment and you go, that's not something that Leinster or the IRFU actually have to pay for. It's a really phenomenal farm system that is essentially paid for, and partly by the state, in that the teachers of all of the schools that are private are funded by the taxpayer, but it's the extracurricular activities then that the parents are paying for. And rugby essentially seems to be one of the biggest benefactors in Irish civil society, from wealthy parents who are sending their kids to private schools. And that's a very interesting dynamic to think about. Like the club game, on the other hand, Leinster spend a good bit of time and effort and money and brain power in trying to get the club game up to a level where that will begin to provide a pathway for players. So we get a bit of the detail on that too. And it is really interesting to see exactly how well run rugby is and how it benefits from this ecosystem, which is fairly symbiotic. You know, the other thing that I think we should talk about briefly is that if you're an absolutely brilliant youth player, there's a very good chance that you'll come to the notice of one of the schools who are competing for the Leinster Schools Cup. So, you know, not always, but a lot of those players who are playing representative, and there's a series of representative areas that you play in the youth system if you're not in the school. And if you're really good in those, you're getting access to play against the school teams that they organise matches. But then a lot of those end up in the school system anyway because they get picked off and they get offered scholarships, or they get brought over for leaving cert year. So it's a real, I didn't really know exactly how the whole thing worked. And it's great to have somebody who's on the inside of it just to explain exactly how it works. And then on the other side, Stephen Rooney is director of rugby at Lansdowne and is talking about the difficulties that the club game, the elite club game faces, and what role there should be. While we were on the call yesterday, recording that piece, one of his players had actually just signed a deal with Connacht. So we don't talk specifically about the fact that it is a pathway into the professional game if it's used properly for that individual, but we do talk about that as a concept. And then what about the club game as a standalone thing? Is there hope for that? Is that the sense you're getting from these conversations? Because it's always getting a bit of a battering in this way. Like, of course, there have been stories and good news stories about people, as you say, getting picked up by provinces. But in terms of being its own sustainable thing that people are interested in, is there light at the end of that tunnel at all? I think that's the point of the conversation. You have to decide what you want to do with it, and everybody has to row in behind that. So they were talking about, Johnny Murphy made the point, if you're in the school system and you're on your senior cup team, you're getting noticed as a rugby player. But then when you leave sixth tier and go and join a club team, no one pays any attention to it. So there's no sense of this being part of the pathway. If you don't get picked up by the academy, for example, you end up being lost, essentially, and there's not much to attract you to the clubs. Bear in mind that schools players aren't allowed to play with their clubs. So that link is broken from the time that they're essentially 13 to the time that they're 18. And then you could be the 10th best player on St. Michael's, say, or Blackrock, or any of those big schools, and not get a Leinster contract. And the rugby system hasn't quite worked out the best way to keep you involved. And the club is the obvious answer, right? So putting a system in place that allows the clubs to use those players and still have them be part of the wider Leinster system. We're talking about the late bloomers here. We're talking about players who might have been injured in 5th and 6th tier who are coming through. You would expect that at some point they might get a chance, but unless that kind of relationship is structurally formalized structurally, then it seems like there's a missed opportunity, and there's also like a lack of certainty about what you actually want from these teams. Because the other thing was the AIL is amateur. I didn't realise this either, that unless you're a contracted Leinster or Munster or Connacht player and sent back to play a couple of games to get over your ring rustiness or whatever, then you are supposed to not be being paid to play in the league. So it's just interesting to kind of get a full understanding of exactly what the relationship between these different strands are. And it feels like they haven't quite worked out, 25 years in professionalism, what the specific role of the club is and how to support the club in providing a level of competition that is one step below the provincial academy, or is one step above the provincial academy, or one step below the whatever that B&I Cup used to be.
Yeah, well, plenty of stuff to get into there after 9 o'clock. Should be an interesting chat. All of Keith Wood's State of the Union totally worth your time going back into the Rugby and Off the Ball podcast or onto YouTube to watch all of those back, and hopefully it's a time for rugby to actually analyse all this and make the required changes that might be needed. One of the other stories Jerry wanted to touch on this morning is about the white paper published by StatSports, the Irish company who've been pretty vital in terms of supplying data to the Premier League in terms of Project Restart. Essentially, they're taking data from GPSs worn by players in inter-county football and in club football and finding out basically how close they are to other players and for how long are they within a 2-metre proximity of them. It's carried in the Irish Times this morning, good piece by Malachy Clerkin in there. And just a couple of the pieces of information that come out from it, from StatSports. Gaelic footballers are spending an average of 2.5 seconds in the proximity of other players during matches, which is a remarkably low number when I initially look at it, but it's especially low when you consider that soccer is at 3.3 seconds. There are higher incursion rates in training, which is obviously another sign of hope because it's easier to control. And the longest time spent between two players was 58 seconds from the range of matches that they looked at from their data of games. And as Clerkin points out in his piece, that's probably from a particularly sticky/mouthy cornerback marking a corner forward. I would have thought it was longer than 58 seconds, the longest time spent between two players. I certainly expected the average to be way above 2.5 seconds. It's not the be-all and end-all of this, and StatSports will say that themselves, but it's quite hopeful to see these numbers.
Yeah, I think if you trace this back, StatSports obviously provided this for the Premier League, and that was one of the pieces of information that the Premier League used to convince the players to go back. And if you think back to how all the conversations that the GAA have been, it's a contact sport. Contact has been one of the big things that Tony Holohan has been talking about since the very start of this. How can we go back into contact sport? And actually, it's not contact in the definition of the World Health Organization. They're very specific medical terms. And again, NFLV was pointing that out too. So I think this is just a bit of information where the science is fairly phenomenal that StatSports have been able to dig into here, and the reams of data they have gone back over such a long period of time. Really clever guys, a really brilliant Irish company who have made it on the global stage, and the fact that they're able to produce this, I think, is really helping with what's coming. So you can see Shane Stapleton had a piece yesterday which had loads of great detail about on the Our Game platform which had loads of great stuff about the return to play. And bits of other return to play stories have leaked out, but he reckons that there's a good chance we're going to see intercounty sooner rather than later, that it won't be the original November deadline, and that we could see action July, August time at club level. The only way that you're going to get to that point is if there's comfort given to players and administrators, and the only way you're going to get comfort is if there's science. And the science that Stat Sports have provided has given everybody an opportunity and cover to say, well, actually, you know what? Maybe we could start doing the things that everybody else around the world are doing. And if we're slow about it and cautious about it, and they have been very slow and they have been very cautious, then we might see games in the autumn time of high caliber and meaningful quality. Yeah, definitely. And I'm all for somebody taking the more cautious approach in these times, and that's exactly what the GAA did. And to go back to what John Horan said that night in the Sunday game, he said that there was a chance that we can move this back, but we can also move it forward. And it's looking increasingly likely from Stapleton's piece in our game that there is going to be a pushing forward of the intercounty calendar to the point where you could have inter-county action in September. We might actually go straight to Shane Hannon, who's with us this morning at 8:10 on OTB AM, because I think you're leading with this story, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. This certainly the big story of the morning, Eoin and Ger. Positive news for GAA fans for sure, but the GAA looks set to begin the county championships, as you've mentioned, in August, and bin the Provincial and All-Ireland Club Series for 2020-21. As you said, Shane Stapleton has the story in our game this morning, with Inter-County Championships looking like starting in September. So a little bit earlier than any of us had really expected. The association looks set to ratify a return-to-play roadmap drawn up by their COVID-19 advisory group. So that's the big news emerging this morning. Some soccer as well for you this morning. Premier League clubs will discuss today what would happen if the season is curtailed by the pandemic. They'll debate scenarios to finalise the league table if the campaign cannot be completed, but the potential for scrapping relegation is not expected to be on the agenda. Clubs could also vote on the possible use of neutral venues for some games. It's expected a fixture list for the opening few weeks of the restarted season will be finalised this afternoon. An individual from Tottenham Hotspur was the only positive test from the Premier League's latest round of coronavirus screening. It's not known if it is a player or indeed a member of staff, but they will likely miss the first round of fixtures as they go into quarantine for 14 days. The new Scottish Premiership season, meanwhile, is set to start in August. Matches are likely to be held behind closed doors, but every game will be on television. Meanwhile, the SPFL has written to clubs to ask what it would take for them to back a 14-man top flight, so it's all change. Bohemians says it was an error for two groups of 3 of their players and a coach to take part in a training session in the same place. Pictures of the session at Father Collins Park in Donamead in Dublin emerged on social media yesterday. Bows insist social distancing was observed, but said they will ensure only one group of 3 players will now meet in a single venue until collective training resumes on the 8th of June. Some golf. Team USA captain Steve Stricker has become the latest voice to speak out against the prospect of a behind-closed-doors Ryder Cup event this year. Padraig Harrington's European team are due to play Stricker's team at Whistling Straits in September, though Rory McIlroy is among the players to call for postponement if fans aren't allowed to attend. Stricker says it would be a crime to play without fans at the Wisconsin course. He also added it would likely reduce the event to a yawn fest. Mercedes chief Toto Wolff says he hopes to finalise a new contract with Lewis Hamilton pretty soon. The current Formula 1 World Champions deal is set to run out at the end of the season. Wolff also admits that they're monitoring the situation of Sebastian Vettel, who is due to become a free agent in December. He, of course, leaving Ferrari. So that would be a fascinating switch if they were to pit Vettel up against Hamilton, 2 of the greatest drivers, of course, of this era. Newcastle United have been criticised by their fans for not communicating their plans for season tickets. The Supporters Trust has also asked the club for confirmation of refunds, as all the remaining home games will be played behind closed doors. Meanwhile, football journalist Michael Delaney joined Off the Ball last night to discuss what is holding up the purchase of Newcastle by a Saudi Arabian-based consortium and why that delay may influence the Premier League's thinking on the matter. Really good stuff, as always, from Miguel. That full piece is up this morning on otbsports.com and indeed the new OTB Sports app, which is live for download in the Play Store and App Store right now. And finally, for me this morning, lads, some basketball news. The NBA will meet with the National Basketball Players Association later to discuss proposals to resume the season with 22 teams next month. They hope to play 8 games at the Disney campus near Orlando in July to decide the teams to progress to the postseason playoffs. The plans would see the playoffs commence in August with the finals in October.
Shane Hannon, great stuff. Chat to you soon.
Thanks, lads.
Shane Hannon there on the line this morning. Let's tell you what's coming up over the next little while on OTB AM. The sports page is coming your way in just a sec. We've got Gina Akpe Moses and Joseph Ojewumi with us later on at around 25 to 9. Michael Fennelly will also be with us at 10 to 9 to chat about how he's been spending lockdown so far, and Keith Wood's State of the Union, as we've already mentioned, coming your way at 10 past 9. We've got domestic and schools rugby up for debate this morning. Johnny Murphy and Steve Rooney will be alongside Ger and Keith. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Starting with OTBSports.com. Leading the way this morning is Kelly Harrington and her quotes from last night. I've the feet up with chocolate and biscuits. Kelly Harrington is all of us. She, on the show last night, she says, I'm going to Dunn's this evening. I'll probably buy a large Cadbury's fruit and nut bar, a large Maltesers bar and a packet of biscuits. Once one of those bars gets opened, it's gone in the day. There is no stopping me until it's gone. A day, like if I could last a day with that sort of menu, I'd be doing well. It's usually an hour or two for me personally, but good to see we're kind of on the same level at this point with elite athletes, Ger.
You are essentially an elite athlete is what I'm hearing here.
Well, like without question, the diet of champions is what I'm at, really, when I look at that. Elsewhere on OTB Sports this morning, we've got human rights versus TV rights. What's holding up the Saudi takeover? As Shane mentioned already, that was from Miguel Delaney on the Football Show last night. It took me years to recognise he was bang on the money then. That's a quote from Andy Dunn. And we've got OTB AM and Bohemians admit error with Father Collins Park training session and that Formula 1 story as well. So that's OTBSports.com right now, and the brand new OTB app is where you can get all your favourite OTB content in one place right now.
The Irish Independent this morning, Bows admit error after training video emerges. It's that same story. I think Bows were doing what a lot of clubs are doing. It's just that they happen to be doing it simultaneously. I think a lot of GA teams around the country have been training in 3s and 4s. Ross, no return for FAI Oldguard is the headline on that story there. And Springbok duo game changers for Munster, says Habana. Brian Habana has been talking about the two lads who are going to fetch up in August and ultimately completely change Munster from one of the teams who were very close to being one of the best teams in Europe to essentially they should be now one of the best teams in Europe.
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with Owen Cormacan's piece that Kerry club games will be pay-per-view as €400,000 loss looms. So this is interesting. The live streaming of Kerry fixtures, whenever the GEA sanctions a return to games activity, will be pay-per-view. This is according to their county chairman, Tim Murphy. He says, irrespective of restrictions on crowd capacity, Kerry County Board will charge a small subscription fee to watch county championship games online. The reason for this is obvious. They're going to face a pretty big loss to the tune of €400,000, according to this piece, if the remainder of the season provides a write-off. This is interesting, isn't it, that club games would go behind a paywall immediately?
Yeah. Like, will there be an outcry about this, or does everybody accept, actually, these are games that, you know, I won't be able to see otherwise, and we're going to pay for them? Maybe this is exactly where the GA needs to go. Like, can you imagine paying $9.99 a month and being able to watch the Kerry Championship, the Dublin Championship, the Kildare Championship, the Donegal Championship? Would that make sense? And the money gets shared, pooled centrally?
I think if you're parting with money to go into a club ground, you realise that there is a commitment you're making to the game in that county or wherever it is. You are supporting grassroots GEA by paying into a club ground. This is possibly the same thing. It is the same idea. It is the same place where your money will be ending up.
And so, I to play devil's advocate, how is that any different from an inter-county match going behind a paywall?
It's a good point. It's a good point. Like, that is up to what the GEA do with that money. You're talking about Sky Sports. You're talking about the advent of pay-per-view GEA, and if that is going to be met with outcry, will this be met with the same backlash? Is that your point?
Well, it clearly isn't going to be met with a backlash, because everybody understands that the reason this is happening is, one, you're not allowed to have fans at games, so putting them on TV is the best thing to do. And two, they need to be able to pay for that service. And three, they need to raise funds. So if there is a backlash, I'll be amazed. Sorry, I should expect there to be a backlash. I won't be surprised that some people will have an issue with this, but it makes perfect sense. I'm just wondering, if you're ascribing a value to something, and this is an old argument at this point, which, you know, seems to have been thrashed out as and beaten like the dead horse that it is. But isn't there a point where you go, there's a value to this, we need to ascribe a value to that and then decide what that is and then fairly price it up so that people can access it. We charge to go to matches. No matter what the game is, we charge in the GAA to go to games. And there should be a charge to watch that game because there's a value to that as opposed to it being given away for free. And I think that has been established now at intercounty level, and it should be established. There should be an opportunity for the county boards to produce really good quality. When you look at the quality of cameras that are available now and the quality of broadcast systems that are available now, you'll actually be able to really sit and watch and enjoy most of these games at a level that 5 years ago was completely off the charts, and that in 3 or 4 years' time, when everything improves again, it's going to be fairly close to the broadcast that we were watching 10 years ago from 24 cameras in a satellite truck.
Just two things here.
I'd pay $9.99 for that.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, but just 2 points on that. First of all, this county board has form in actually realising the value of their club games. I'm not sure if you remember last year, they wouldn't allow, I can't remember, was it one of the county semi-finals or one of the county finals to not be aired on TG Cahir because they wanted people to actually show up to the game and pay their money to actually go and see it. So the process of doing that is not too dissimilar. But also the second point here is that the backlash will definitely be checked by the fact that this is a necessity, that you've got the €400,000 hole here, and you can easily make a case that this is not our ideology to put games behind a paywall online, but it has to be our ideology for us to stay afloat.
Yeah, look, exactly on the second point. On the first point, I'm sure there was a bit of politicking going on there between who actually owns the rights to the county matches, because I know that they get sold centrally and yet the counties feel that they should be getting all the revenue from them. So they don't like the fact that those games are on TV because they believe, rightly or wrongly, that they're not seeing enough of the funding coming from the Central GAA. Now, Central GAA would make the argument very well that all of the money they make essentially gets distributed back right around the country. So counties sometimes should just suck it up for the greater good. But it turns out we're not very good at that in Irish sport, Eoin.
No, it doesn't seem that way. Just a couple of other things from the Irish Examiner. Kerry Secretary O'Regan adds voice as FAI regime faces battle. This is an FAI council member, John O'Regan, who's basically echoed the concerns of Nixon Morton by insisting only intervention by FIFA will prevent civil war erupting at committee level. So he's the veteran secretary of the Kerry District League who represents the Munster FA on council. He is one of almost 30 legislators on the brink of being forced out under the terms of the state's bailout deal. It's a good piece by John Fallon this morning. Some strong quotes from O'Regan. Football decisions should be taken by football people. The GAA wouldn't get away with being run by people without knowledge of the sport. That's why they are so strong in the community, and I'd fear for soccer if we went away from that. I am democratically elected annually to council, yet we have a minister who was voted out by his constituency in the last election, casting football people aside. I think that the whole Shane Ross situation is irking a lot of people in the FAI at the moment, to say the least, especially people who've been around for quite some time. It'll be very interesting if there is a new sports minister over the next couple of months, whether or not there will be a rollback on the term limits or when the term limit rule needs to actually be implemented. The other two stories then leading the way on the Irish Examiner. Eoin Merchant's been out doing the rounds talking about his unbelievable goal last year. Hard for Lane to count steps on final winning goal is the headline here in the Examiner. Tough for Conor Lane to have known if he took too many steps. And Naas confidence.
What do you think of that, Eoin?
I think.
What do you think of that, Eoin?
It is tough for any referee to count those steps. And why would you take such an unbelievable goal away from a kid like that? What a moment for him. And Naas confident it can lead successful racing return. Naas Racecourse, primed for the return of Irish racing on Monday afternoon, and racecourse manager Eamon McAvoy is confident of a positive experience. So that's the Examiner, plenty happening there this morning.
Yeah, I think, if you remember and you think back to when it was announced that racing was going to be coming back at the start of June, there was definitely some people going, oh, that's too soon. Now it's like, Jesus, that's exactly the right time to be coming back, right? There's a sense that, one, they've got the experience of doing the 10 days at the end behind closed doors. They've ramped up their precautions, and it feels like we're absolutely ready to have some more return to normality, and racing happening next week feels about right now.
Yeah, I saw someone making this point over the last couple of days that no matter what stance you took on return to play, you were probably going to be wrong and I put that wrong, at one time or another. So people were pointing the finger at the Bundesliga before it came back, saying this is ridiculous, this is inhumane, there's no way that the Bundesliga or any competitive sport should be coming back, regardless of no fans behind closed doors. Fair play to Ligue 1 for, you know, ending their season. And then all of a sudden, now here we are, Ligue 1 are trying to reverse their decision to have actually called off the season, and everybody's like, fair play to the Bundesliga, paving the way for everybody in Europe. So no matter what stance you took, at one point or another, you would have been wrong, and everybody is a broken clock, it turns out, eventually.
As Monty Burns would say, cheese-eating surrender monkeys. Breakfast proves a great start for East Belfast Club is the headline on the Sports Thursday section of the Irish Times. This is a story about a new GAA club being set up in East Belfast, across the barricades. A love story that could only be involved in the administration of an amateur sports organisation. A new proximity study provides shot in the arm for return to action. Owen's already talked about that. That's Michael Clerkin's story about the Stat Sports white paper that's helping to convince people that a return to GAA action is something that we can do this year. And let's get on with it because it's going to be good. Merchant, wrong player in the right place at right time. Turned out he was the right player in the right place at the right time because obviously that was the sliding doors moment. That was the moment of the game, Owen. That was the moment that your little Kerry Hart died, right?
When we
didn't spend enough time in this goal. We haven't spent enough time in this. Go on.
I was in a different continent when it happens, thankfully. It was when we do our classic game club on this game in years to come, it'll be moment of the match. Well, Owen Merchant, obviously. What else is there? Like we're doing Ireland-England 07 in rugby this week, and it's like Shane Horgan's try, obviously. What else is there? Like Owen Merchant's moment is on that level and instantly memorable. You know it's going to be talked about for a long, long time. And because of the fact that he is a cornerback, you know for a fact that it will be his moment that we talk about for a long, long time. When like Bernard Brogan when he scored a goal in the 2013 final, you were like, well, it's hard to select between all the great Brogan moments. But for Merchant, this is his career moment, defined already. It's so young in his career too.
Not enough was made of the insult that was paid to Bernard Brogan where he came in that top 20 footballers of Dublin. Like,
where did he finish?
I can't even remember, but it was nowhere near high enough. Bernard and Alan Brogan should have been way higher up. It was almost as if there was like, well, sure, look, what have they done? What really has this team done, you know, with all the advantages that they have versus the team of the 70s and early 80s? Like, come on now.
I don't think there was an outfield Dublin player in the top 5 of the Leinster over the last 50 years. Was it 50 years? Which is remarkable, really, but it also shows the strength of Stephen Cluxton and how he's almost become the unanimous decision for the best dub of all time. The London Times is where I'm going to next. West Indies trio refused to tour England. 3 West Indies players. They've refused to be part of the squad to tour England for the 3 test matches next month because of concerns over coronavirus. Martin Ziegler then says a third of games on free-to-air. Amazon have now confirmed that it would make its 4 matches free-to-air. So that's 30 in total in the UK anyway. The Premier League matches will be free. And Adidas scraps £20 million Ozil deal. Adidas has decided not to renew Mesut Ozil's sponsorship deal, worth about £20 million over the past 7 years. The German company is instead looking to focus on the next generation of stars. So his boot deal with Adidas expires next month. His association with the company dates back to 2013 when he was at Real Madrid. He switched from Nike and secured a fairly lucrative contract. But Adidas done with Mesut Ozil.
It's a lot of cash, isn't it?
Over 7 years, yeah, it obviously is. I thought it was 20 million per year when I saw it first, and I thought that was fairly jaw-dropping, but it is 20 million over 7 years. Just to wear a pair of boots, says you, it's fairly good money. So he'd been photographed wearing boots with the logo blacked out recently, so it's obviously been in the pipeline for some time. So it had been suggested in Germany that his public image was a factor behind the decision as well, which is something you probably need to dig a little bit deeper into.
Yeah. All right. The Mirror Sport this morning. Let's hear it for the noise. TV fans will decide whether they want crowd sounds or not when the Prem kicks off again. Let's hear it for the Troy. Troy Deeney's return to training is a massive boost for struggling Watford. And they also have Bow Way Have We Broken Rules, except that they actually have broken the rules, obviously. Lockdown may help own goal is Owen Merchant, as we were talking about a little bit earlier on. Also, their stats, just what GA needed for a return, is the white paper from Stat Sports saying that, come on, let's get it on. Let's get it on.
The Irish Sun this morning. Why are you taking our cash? Toon grab season ticket debits early. No crowd but no Black Cats refund. That is the back of the Sun. The Liver Blue then, Chelsea's meals on wheels. Chelsea are feeding their players on the go in the bid to get them into shape for the start of the season, or the restart of the season. There's Owen Merchant as well on his wonder goal. Prem are tackling problems, meanwhile, writes Martin Lipton. Prem club bosses will be under pressure to sort out the remaining project restart rows today. So it's D-Day number 1045, it feels, at this point. Every Thursday or every Friday, there's another significant meeting. Today is one of those. It's safety race for big guns then. English top-flight teams are in a race against time to gain safety certificates they need to be able to resume the season. The delay in finalising the fixtures for the project restart means all 20 teams are yet to apply for new licences to stage matches. So a couple of wrinkles to be ironed out from the Premier League's perspective. That is the Irish Sun.
I got the star for you next, and that is 5 in a row goal. Hasn't changed me. Dublin's own Merchant, Minister and FAI at loggerheads. We've already covered that story. That's Shane Ross versus the FAI Old Guard. Tottenham positive is the only negative. Is a story of a picture of Jose Mourinho, that player who they're saying isn't that important. There's an interesting detail to allow to leak out. So there you are, going about your business, training, thinking maybe I'm going to get a chance in the team. All of a sudden, you get coronavirus. You're like, oh, this is pretty bad. And then the news leaks out that actually you're not that important. Like, who said I wasn't that important? It can't be anybody else. They're literally talking about one player. So whoever's briefing on behalf of Spurs that this player isn't particularly important, that player needs to get on to his agent fairly quickly. And the back page of the Star this morning is Naughty Bows. Gypsy said to avoid rap despite breaching FAI guidelines on training sessions. So there won't be any repercussions for Bows for their training session.
If you were a team threatened with relegation, you would say this player who is tested positive is our most important player, wouldn't you? You'd be like, this is a scandal that we're coming back to play. It's a very valuable player, unnamed guy, number one, who has contracted the virus.
We have a cluster of 5 players who have got it, and it's like our top scorer, our chief assists, our captain, our centre back, our centre midfielder. Away you go.
It would be an epic version of Sunderland Till I Die, the inside story of the club that actually pushes that narrative on the external anyway. Back page of the Guardian is Tottenham player test positive for coronavirus, as you mentioned, and that West Indies story as well. They've opted out a trio of players anyway, have opted out of a tour of England over safety fears. That is the Guardian.
The Mail this morning, Bowes Park strife. Dublin side admit breaching ban on training 6 times. So it wasn't just that one time that they got photographed. Never admit that, lads. And Olympians' fight ends in victory. Ireland's Olympians have received a tremendous boost with the news that health officials will grant exemptions from COVID-19 restrictions for the use of training facilities. And then close contact study gives Gaelic Games a huge boost. That's the news coming through from the Stat Sports survey. And then they also have a story about Shane McGrath profiling the Director General, who's leading by example in a crisis. So praise for Tom Ryan from Shane McGrath in the Mail today.
The back page of the Herald is Owen Goal. Dubs hero Merchant. Lockdown gives us a chance to recover, he says. Ross, no return for Old Guard at the FAI. Sports Minister Shane Ross has given his backing to the FAI board and says he won't allow the Old Guard to retain power at the association. And we'll do whatever it takes, says Klopp. Pool boss vows fans will have a celebration. And finally for me then, it is the Racing Post. Stars out at Newmarket, racing returns to flat headquarters, and roosters starting to crow. The NRL returned with a bang last week, but the enforced break appears to have served some sides better than others. So the competition's first round of fixtures since March 22, fitness was a big issue, and in the Racing Post, they've got a preview of the next round. We are going to take a quick break in a moment before we get to Gina Akpe Moses. Just to tell you as well that the OTB Sports App is live right now. You can go onto the App Store, onto the Google Play Store, and you'll be able to grab that right now. It is available, brand new, sparkly. Ger Gilroy, have you downloaded it? Have you been scrolling through it over the last couple of days?
Yeah, it's been class. Just search OTB Sports on the app in the App Store, and you'll get it. Really good response from people so far. You can email us feedback@otball.com if you've got anything that you want to get off your chest. But to be honest, when you download it, you realise the amount of content that we create, and there's something for everybody. You can pick your favourite sports, you can personalise your content, so you just get whatever it is you want. We'll have live scores when live sport returns. There's an events tab where you can get tickets. You can nab tickets first. We will be having some app exclusives as well. We're going to put up the OTB Gold series, which has been broadcasting on OTB Sports Radio as its own podcast strand, and that'll be exclusive for app users. We also have a very, very big name interview coming your way, which we'll be making available first on the OTB Sports app. So get onto the Play Store or get onto the App Store and search OTB Sports, and you can download that for your delectation and goodness.
Okay.
Hours and hours of free fun.
Absolutely. Nothing better than that. It is 8:34 on this Thursday morning. Up next, we're going to be joined by two of Ireland's most exciting athletes, Gina Akpe Moses and Joseph Ojewumi, for a chat about their lives in lockdown and the silent racism that still exists in Irish sport. But first, on the football show last night, Miguel Delaney joined Joe to chat about a range of issues. You can listen back to the full football show and catch all of our podcasts right now over on the OTB Sports app. Just search for the OTB Sports in the App Store or Google Play Store and give it a download. Here's Miguel on why the Newcastle Saudi takeover has just hit a roadblock.
Premier League and Newcastle find themselves in the middle of what is an economic cold war between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which has of course led to the growth of this station, Be Out Q, which is basically, the kind of crudest pirate undermining of the Qatari station, Be In Q, or Be In Sport, sorry. The Premier League of themselves they've exhausted every avenue trying to take action against this. They've gone to the US government, the UK government, they've issued statements. They've tried to take action 9 times in Saudi Arabia, but tellingly couldn't get a firm to represent them in that case. So I think that has appeased a lot of broadcasters the Premier League do have a strong relationship with. And it has, of course, led to this WTO report on BLQ, which has come out in 2 weeks. And I think it won't be until after that this issue will be decided, because obviously if as everyone expects, the WTO rules that the Saudi Arabian state is behind BLQ, it would put any Premier League decision before then in a bit of a tricky position, because there's so much wrapped up in this. Because I was talking to someone involved this week for piece on that, and if you look at what the Premier League is, it has, beyond the football, the actual body of the Premier League is essentially, it's been stripped down from Richard Scudamore's time to essentially become just purely a right-selling business, and that's why it's so successful, why it's made so much money. But that is all it is, and that's been built on really strong relationships with broadcasters all over the world, and obviously kind of proven really strong in issues like protecting copyright, shutting down streams, all the rest of it. And for the sanction of a deal to go through, where a state has been behind this pirate station, basically, it would cause a lot of problems. And there's been talking about potential breaches of trust. It would change not breaches of trust, but it would change relationships, and potentially, as much as anything, just maybe lessen the value of rights in future.
All right, delighted to say that Irish athletes Gina Akpe Moses and Joseph Ojewumi are with us now. You're very welcome, folks. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Hiya. Thanks for having us.
Gina, we might start with you because you've already been speaking to Arthur O'D for OTBsports.com. It's a fantastic piece. It's worth checking out. But I might just start with what happened last week in Minneapolis with the video of George Floyd and how that went viral. I'd just love to hear what your initial thoughts were upon seeing that video.
When I saw it on my timeline on Twitter, I did not watch the full video. I couldn't watch the full video. I just saw probably the first couple seconds of it, and I was like, okay, I know how this is going to end. I don't want to watch the full video. I don't like seeing that kind of stuff. So I just kind of skipped it and looked at the comments just to see what actually happened. But yeah, it was disgusting to see, because it's not the first time, and it hasn't been the last either, even since he has died. So it was quite frustrating, and it was just enraging people more and more. So yeah.
I think that was an emotion shared by a lot of people, that this is not the first time. It's possibly the most shocking incident that a lot of people will have seen recently. And I think that's probably the reason why this has exploded so much, that while we all realised that this sort of thing has been happening forever, I don't think many people were left without being shocked by the specific content of the video.
Yeah, definitely.
What was your response then to, or what were you thinking when the protests started to develop and there was such an unbelievable reaction to this? Because I think that probably surprised people as well, just how everything exploded after this, and there was such a show of solidarity thereafter.
Yeah, I think it's just very relieving that it's we're finally, not just America, but the whole world is getting involved, and it's not just they're about, because we know there's black people everywhere. It's not just America that they resonate. Like, they're all over the place. So I think it's good that, like, we have protests in Dublin, protests in London, in France, like in New Zealand, even in Japan and all them kind of places. Like, it's like everyone is like standing up for us, because it's not just that, like, we've been left in the dark for so long, and people think that, like, you know, because everyone's gotten used to how racism is and how people act towards black people, it's like, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. But, like, to us it is, because we've always had to be bottom barrel. Like, it has never been fair for us to just live a normal and like an equal life like everyone else. So the fact that everyone is kind of like joining in now, it just makes it seem as if, yeah, like, there's going to be change. It's going to be a turning point in the way black people are seen in society, and, like, we will get what we deserve. So
because it is quite easy for us in Ireland, especially, to point fingers at the United States, especially because it is such an outward culture of racism that they have in the United States of America. It's actually far more difficult on a number of levels for us to be introspective here in Ireland. Do you think we've achieved that in Ireland I know you're based in the UK, in Ireland and in the UK, to have actually spent a bit of time over the last week looking at ourselves and how we've also had huge failings in our society when it comes to race?
I would like to believe that, you know, people are now like recognizing, you know, whether they've been like hiddenly racist or openly racist. I think hopefully, like, they can realize now that how they can fix it, or they can change their mindset and, like, see the world through our point of view and not just theirs, because I think that's also been the issue. Like, everyone is just not really, like, trying to put themselves in our shoes, and hence why they don't know how to really sympathize with us, or, like, even, like, feel what we feel, because they haven't even tried to think, okay, what would it be like to be a black person just for the day, or what would it be like when slavery was still on? Because it's like everyone just neglects the facts that, you know, the average black person does find it harder to get a job. You know, like, you know, when you go shopping, you're being watched because, like, oh, are they gonna steal? Like, the stereotypes, all that kind of stuff. So I would like to believe that people in Ireland now are like more aware of it, and they will now act accordingly, or do better to help other people that they see who are in need, or who have been, like, subjected to racism.
What have been your specific experiences of racism in Ireland?
I think it's just been little things like when I would have my natural hair out, and they'd be like, oh, Gina, why is your hair so short? And they just start laughing. And, like, I'm like, okay, cool. And, like, I've been told they were surprised that I could speak really good English, and I had a Dundalk accent. Like, I didn't have an African accent. And I'm just thinking to myself, why would I have a strong African accent when I came here when I was almost 3 years old? I was barely speaking, so how is that even going to work? And then obviously I've been called a nigger before when I was, like, quite young, by some boy who didn't understand what he was saying, but he said it. So it's like, even the fact that he didn't understand what he was saying, but still knew it was offensive and still said it, that was a problem to me as well. So it's just been stuff like that. And online racism too, after I've competed and got medals, and, you know, I had the flag on the wrong way around, and people were like, why, that's Ivory Coast, why do we have her? She's not an Irish person. Like, her name doesn't sound Irish. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like, you can keep going, but it's still not going to stop the fact that I still competed and I got a medal for everyone. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, does that, obviously that has an impact. Like, all of those things combined must have an impact that wear you down over a period of time. How do you not let it have an impact?
I just feel like there's just bigger stuff to deal with. I think, I don't, honestly, like, comments, people will always talk, and I'm like, I personally don't have time to dwell on someone's ignorance. If you want to learn, you will go and do your research and you will learn. If you don't want to learn, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to force you to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not going to force you to be empathetic or sympathetic to me as a black person. So it's just a case of, it's not down to me, it's down to them at the end of the day. So that's why I just get over it quite easily.
Joseph, sorry, Ger, we might just get your view on this, Joseph. What's been your view of racism in Ireland? Have you experienced it firsthand?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. Like Gina already said, the one where you're walking into a shop and automatically the security guard comes and starts following you around the shop. I just experienced that last Saturday with some of my friends, and one of them got really annoyed at it and started like challenging the security guard, asking like, "Why are you following us?" They didn't have an answer, just kept doing it. I love it. There's a lot of microaggressions that happens that a lot of Irish people don't see. You know, like the whole hair thing. They want to touch your hair. They ask you, do you like watermelon? I mean, like, just because my color of skin looks like this is me, I'm going to automatically like everything that everybody else is black likes. I mean, some like blatant ones is like, when I played football a lot, like, you know, you get really heated when you play football, and you annoy somebody, you tackle somebody the wrong way, and the first thing they'll come at you and say is they call you a black bastard, call you the N-word, really blatant to your face, or even take it off the field. Have a regular argument with somebody. The first thing they turn to is to comment about your race. That's the first thing they turn to. They have nothing else to come at you with. And like, that just shows hate, and it shows a lot of disrespect. And, you know, they know it hurts. So that's why they'll use it, you know. Yeah, there's quite a lot. Like, you're gonna have to keep me on this call for a while if you want to hear everything. Like,
it is remarkable that was just last Saturday, especially in the wake of everything that's happened, and like, I guess the ability to stand up to that security guard that you mentioned is something, but like I think what happens is that a lot of people in this country say, well, I haven't seen outward racism, therefore it doesn't exist, which is a completely wrong way of looking at it. And I just hope that this period of time allows us to have conversations like this, Joseph, and actually realise that is not true, because, as you say, you have an unbelievably lengthy list of things you can mention, of cases you can mention, where when people say, oh, racism doesn't exist in this country, it's just patently incorrect.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Like, yeah, the list is endless. And a lot of people say, like you said, if they don't see it, like, it doesn't exist. And I mean, like, I think they're part of the problem. But I love the fact that so many people get involved. Like, there's so many, like, you can see all the protests everywhere. It's all over social media. So if you still can't, like, have a little inkling of how we feel about this, then that's ridiculous, man. You're just not paying attention. You're being ignorant. Like, but I love the fact that it's getting out there, and just the fact that it's getting out there and people are hearing about it, people are seeing it. Like, it might not make an initial change, but at least it will spark the thought in your mind when you do see it happening. I think that's just a good enough W. Is a good enough win for us now. If everyone now understands that these things happen everywhere in the smallest of ways, I think it makes it a little bit better. It makes it a little bit easier to live, and it makes them a bit more conscious if they want to go out and carry out a racist act. Like,
what would you like to happen in future, Joseph, apart from people thinking that this exists and I guess feeling seen, apart from your neighbours and your friends seeing that you go through these experiences, what else would you like to happen?
Like it to stop, of course. Like, I like it to stop. I like people to actually be able to empathise and stand up for me. Like, there might be cases where I just can't stand up for myself. I don't know what sort of situation that may be, but there might be a situation where I can't stand up for myself, and someone in a better position can help me out and challenge their own race and talk and just say, yeah, that's not wrong, that's not right. Come on, like, fix up, do better. I like it to stop, of course. Like, nobody wants to be experiencing racism. Come on, like, it's a way to oppress people, and like, we don't be feeling like that. So the ultimate goal, hopefully, in this lifetime, is for it to stop completely.
The big thing that people have been talking about in America is institutional racism, and in many ways it's a catch-all term that kind of allows everybody to go, well, it's not actually me who's doing this, it's the institutions, and I'm just a part of that institution, so we need to change the institution. But obviously individuals need to change, and individuals do make up institutions. You know, it's not a building, it's the people who run an organization, or the people who run a society, or the people who run a school or a university, or like it is something that collectively we need to talk about and to hear, I think, the individual examples, because that's the sort of stuff that actually brings it home to us. You being followed by a security guard is the type of thing that everybody would understand is a fairly horrific level of subconscious racism that you're being subjected to. And it's not even the overt stuff. Like, it's the as you say, the microaggressions that happen on a daily basis, that I think that is almost the hardest thing for people to put themselves in the experience of, but equally is the easiest thing for people to understand. How would I feel if that was happening to me? Well, pretty pissed off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's true. Like you asked, there's a great video that's been going around of this American activist lady, and she asked the crowd, would they like to be treated the way that Black society are treated in the States, and she asked them, if you want to be treated like the Blacks are, stand up. She repeated it. Nobody stood up. So I think that speaks volumes. And if you were to ask, I don't know if you were to ask Irish people here, they'd like to be treated the way Black people are treated here. I'd be interested to see what they say about that.
I think so. Gina was talking about, how difficult it is to get jobs, and how, we've seen before that the part of town that you live in has an impact on your ability to get jobs and to access medical care and to do all that kind of stuff that, like, again, is taken for granted by so many people. In terms of targeting institutional racism, have you seen anything around the world? Are you seeing anything in your own social media circles where you are hopeful that it is becoming something that the country is waking up to and becoming conscious about?
Sorry, could you repeat that really? I didn't hear you too well.
Yeah, are you seeing stuff that suggests that we are, as a country in Ireland, becoming more aware of the unconscious racism, the institutional racism, and the sort of stuff that actually we just need to think about?
No, I don't.
I guess, are you hopeful?
I don't really see that happening at all. I don't see anybody doing that right now.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything either, to be honest. Like, I just think people are scared. I think people are scared to stand up for what they know is what's like right. You get it. I don't know. To this day, I don't understand why racism is seen as a topic that really gets under people's skin and proper controversial. Like, people are losing jobs for speaking out about how they feel about this, and I'll never understand it, because you blatantly know it's wrong. So why are people getting, like, crucified for agreeing that it's wrong? So I think, like, there's still a lot of work that everyone needs to do. Like, everyone has a lot of work to do. I don't think it's going to just blow over, in the next, just because it's been made aware now, people are going to stop. People are still going to keep doing it. And I think it's just that, like, Black people in Ireland, we have a smaller community in Ireland, that's the thing. So it's just for us to, like, branch out more and, like, try to get ourselves in a position of power. And, like, until we see more Black people in positions of power, then really and truly, I don't really know if Ireland or any place is going to really change the way it should change. So,
Gina, when you say that people are getting crucified for agreeing that it's wrong, what in particular are you referring to here? Because I think obviously the most prominent example over the last few years has been the Colin Kaepernick situation, who, I mean, obviously has essentially lost his livelihood for speaking out against racism.
I'm just seeing people's small stories online. Like, I'm seeing people, like, family members kicking them out of the house because they don't agree with that, because they say racism is wrong. I saw a girl the other day say that she actually lost her job because she contacted her, like, her company and said, you know what, I'm just gonna, like, she posted something and obviously they must have seen it online, and then they messaged her and she lost her job. And also even police officers, a guy who wanted to take the knee and stand up for racism, he also had to leave his job because they were not letting him go and protest. It's just a lot of things like that. Like, you should not be getting in trouble for speaking out. Do you get it? Because you can speak out about other things like LGBT and all that kind of stuff, and you don't lose your job. But when it comes to speaking about racism, it's a big hole. It's a problem. Like, it's something that it's really, like, offending you, and you shouldn't really be offended. If you know it's wrong, it's wrong. Like, there's no two ways about it. Like, you honestly, like, if you read about Black history and how they suffered and how Black people have suffered even till this day, like, for you to now be offended by it, I don't understand that thought process. It doesn't make any sense to me. So,
have you noticed a difference, Gina, in racism from Ireland to the UK?
The only difference is that the UK, they're more open with their racism, but in Ireland, they're more hidden behind. Like, they like to put on a little front that, they are not racist. They're really nice people, and obviously some people are nice people. And I have not saying that everyone's bad, but some people are nice people. But those nice people can also be people that will talk bad behind you, and like they will just throw you under the bus the minute race gets into like something bad happens to you, or they'll blame you or something like that. So I think when they get angry, they'll go straight to the race card. So it's a case of like people do like to hide it, but in the UK they'll just say whatever they want to say, and it's just what it is. Like people try to also hide it in the UK, but they're more open with it. So yeah.
I was listening to Greg Popovich this week saying that not being racist is no longer enough in terms of where we are in the world, that we actually all need to make an effort to be anti-racist. How can that effort be made, Gina, in your view?
How can that effort be made? How to be anti-racist? Lord, I mean, I think people just educating themselves. That's probably the first step. Like, educate yourself. If you don't understand why Black people are so upset and so tired, read on the history and imagine if that's you or your brother, your sister, your mother, like your dad, a cousin, do you know, anybody that like you hold dearly to your heart. Imagine if that was them or if that was you. Like, just picture how painful it would be. Like, and like, it's like the psychological, emotional, and just like the physical like effects it has on you as a person. It's traumatic. Do you understand? So like, if you can really like delve into the history and educate yourself in the right way, then of course, like that's the first step to anti-racism. That's the first step to like not trying to like blame Black people or stereotyping them, because it's like Black people were we were like shoved into a hole, and we're being like, we want to come out of it, but we're being told no, we just being kicked back into the hole. Like, we don't put ourselves there. White people brought us and dug up that hole and shoved us into the hole, expecting us to be happy in a dark hole that no one want to be in. So it's a case of like trying to just educate yourself, helping people in the best way possible, and just knowing, like, just checking your moral code and knowing what is right for just basic human rights in general, and trying to fixate on that, and like just there can progress.
Could I add to that? I think you could also just like ask or talk to someone that's Black. Just talk to them, ask them what can they do, because a lot of people don't know what they can do. They don't know what to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing. But like, I feel like a way to educate yourself is just talk to those people who actually go through it. So you see, like you must know someone who's Black. I don't know if you must know somebody. So just find somebody, ask them the questions that bother you, how you can make a difference, how you can be anti-racist, and trust they will help you. Because if they see someone trying to help, I think that's a good step. If they see someone trying to understand, that's a great step. So I say just reach out.
Well said. Listen, Gina and Joseph, it's been great chatting to you. Thanks a million for taking the call this morning.
All right,
no problem. Thanks very much.
It is 8:57 on this Thursday morning, and I'm delighted to say that former Kilkenny hurler and current Offaly boss Mick Fennelly will join us next on OTB AM this morning to chat about a big fundraiser that's happening with the Offaly hurling squad this weekend. Now, Kelly Harrington joined Joe last night for a feature interview about life in lockdown, the Olympics and training. You can get the full piece through the OTB Sports app right now, and Kelly is saying her diet is much more balanced than people believe.
Does the drop from 64 kgs down to 60 make any great difference?
No, I've come down from 69. So I won my first elite at 69, then I come down to 64. I was always light for 64, but I'm actually heavier now at 60 than I was at 64. Right. So I don't like making weight. Nobody likes making weight, because like 60 is it's a natural way for me, I suppose, because 64 isn't really, because I'm meeting people coming down. But it just means I have to tidy up, and I can't really eat chocolate and biscuits and stuff when it's getting closer to weighing in. And I love chocolate and biscuits. Like, that's my little, when I come home from training or work, it'll be feet up, chocolate and biscuits, and that's it. People think that like, oh, you're a real clean diet, and no, it's a balanced diet. I eat the exact same as everybody else. Like, it's balanced.
Yeah. So do you have chocolate in the house? Because if we buy it, it gets eaten. I mean, if we buy a box of Pringles and it gets opened, there's no day two. So no. Do you have it in the house, or how do you approach all that? Because if it's in the house, for a lot of people, they're going for it.
Yeah, no, as soon as I buy, like, if I go to Dunn, so I'm going to Dunn today, I'll probably buy a large Cadbury's fruit and nut large bar, and a large Maltesers bar, and a packet of biscuits. Once one of those bars gets opened, it's gone in the day. Like, there is no stopping, and they're the big bars. Like, there's no stopping until it's all gone. And then I'll sit there the next day, and I'll be like, no, I won't have that. No, wait until the weekend. Now I'll be good. I'll wait. And then I'll be like, I'll have one bit, and then it's gone again. And then the next day, one biscuit leads to the whole packet. I can't, like, I don't do things in half measures. Do you know what I mean? It's all or nothing, like, in for the penny, in for the pound, so to say.
There's a lot of people nodding along in agreement.
Yeah, I'm certainly one of those people. Good on Kelly Harrington, making us feel a little bit more normal on this Thursday morning. Right, it is 8:59. You're watching OTB AM. Delighted to say we've got Offaly hurling boss Michael Fennelly with us. Good morning to you, Michael. How are things?
Good now, lads. Good on.
So this Saturday night, 7:30, 6th of June, is this the most nervous you've ever been at any point in your life? This forget the hurling, forget the management. Martina Turner, Michael Fennelly is what I'm seeing here for the Offaly Senior Hurlers variety show.
Yeah, it's a bit different, all right, Owen, a bit unusual. Maybe that's what happens in retirement from hurling and that, you know, and looking at carving out a new career, but I don't think it'll last too long, being honest about it. So we've a lovely variety show lined up at 7:30, as you said, and to be going out on social media platforms. We've about 14 acts lined up that in terms of players, and we have the Camogie girls coming in with an act, we have the under-20s coming in with an act, and we have like Michael Burney and Joe Troy there, two local media men as well, who also are putting in an act. So we have a lot going on, a really interesting variety show, which should get a good few laughs, I think.
We have a teaser of your act here, so I think we can have a look at it now. This is... That is very much Michael Burney, not Michael Fennelly there. I was actually like, Michael's after letting the hair grow out during lockdown until you actually realise that it is just a wig. So that is not you. What is your act going to be?
Mine is Martina Turner, but I wish it was that one, to be honest. I wish it was Father Ted. It would have been a safer option to go for. But how that kind of came about nearly was, it was only about 3 weeks ago we decided maybe to look into doing a lip sync more than anything, and the whole thing evolved from there. And I was probably trying to egg on a couple of players to do a couple of acts. And we have 3 under-20s that are on our team: Ross Ravenhill, Kieran Burke, and Brian Dignan. And I said to the boys, look, if you do all the single ladies, I said, look, I'll do Tina Turner. And I didn't think they'd do it, to be honest. And that's the truth of it, because it's a tricky one, and obviously you have to dress up in leotard and whatnot. But the boys went ahead anyway, and they sent me on a couple of clips of their practice runs. So I started planning my Tina Turner thing. But I heard subsequently then that Brian obviously is a son of Michael Dignan, our chairperson, and Michael was telling me, Brian was asking me who Tina Turner was there lately. So I had to fill in Michael and the bits and pieces on it as well. But it should be a brilliant night. And as I said, a lot of players are putting themselves out there with different acts. Some obviously are dressing up as females and doing acts in that side of things. And obviously there's lip sync and there's sketches. So there's a really good variety. And look, it's all going to 2 local charities. It's going to Down Syndrome Offaly and going to Jigsaw Offaly. And they're 2 kind of charities that we're quite passionate about. The fundraising has been going well, but we're going into the last 2 or 3 days now where we really need a good bump again in terms of money coming in, and hopefully we'll get that.
Well, if your appetite hasn't already been whet, this is Michael Fennelly as Martina Turner.
Tonight, Will, I'm going to be Martina Turner.
Like the outfit is obviously off to a T.
The which?
The outfit.
Oh, the outfit, yeah. I struggled to get something like that she was wearing in terms of my family were saying, get a different dress with kind of strings coming out. I was like, will you stop? I haven't got time for this. And that done me now, to be honest. I didn't bother with makeup or fake tan or anything now, so I kept it fairly natural, which was important. And also, on top of our fundraiser Saturday night, Eoin, we also have a solo run on the Sunday, which is just as important, to be honest. And again, we're using both charities in terms of the fundraising, and we're running from Kilcormac to Tullamore. In Kilcormac, we have our Down syndrome Offaly branch, and in Tullamore, we have the Jigsaw branch. So that's about 20 kilometres, and the boys are doing a relay. So we have about maybe 15 to 16 players doing the Variety Act, and we've about 15 odd players then doing the solar run. So it's a weekend of fundraising for two, charities that we're looking to raise money for.
Great stuff. And as you mentioned there, go on, Ger.
You're going to very extreme lengths to take away any sense of importance about your own retirement. You slip that in there, and then you dress up as Tina Turner, so that the only thing people are going to talk about is Tina Turner in this fundraiser. And in the meantime, you've hung up the boots.
Hung up the boots, yeah. So yeah, just probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, Ger, I probably decided to hang them up, and obviously it's not an easy decision, because you start at 5 years of age or 6 years of age down in the local hurling field, and hurling is obviously is a massive part of my life, and my club is a massive part of my life. And look, it doesn't feel like the end, to be honest, but in one sense, I probably won't ever hurl a game again. Like that probably scares me a bit. And maybe at some stage I might go back playing Special Junior or something, but I don't think probably that's even practical, because look, the reason I gave up was because of injuries, and I don't want to be going back playing Special Junior and end up with a cruciate injury or something. So I don't think that would work either. I bought a bike there during the week as well there, so kind of a bit of impulsive buying to do a bit of cycling maybe in that, and trying to keep fit, and hopefully maybe get a bit of time to play a bit of golf. But it is a bit surreal, and it was a difficult decision, and there is a bittersweet with it, because the last 24 months have been savage, winning 2 Club All-Irelands, capturing both of them too. Like it was a dream come true, to be honest, but it still doesn't feel like that I'm finishing on a massive high, to be honest. I feel like I'd love to go again, and but just as I said, the body just can't go there at the moment.
Was it an accumulation of all the injuries, or you've had back injuries over the years? I always felt like that was the most debilitating, when the rest of your body is totally fine, but the back won't actually do what you need it to. Was there something specific at this point that you're like, okay, I've had enough?
Yeah, I think an accumulation is right, to be fair, but I think just last year I ended up with an operation, a procedure, probably more than anything, just microfracturing on the knee, and again, I wasn't expected. I caused it, went in for a scope to clean out the cartilage and damage that had been done to my knee. But unfortunately, there was so much damage done, I had to get microfracturing, which is drilling holes into the femur to try and generate a bit of scar tissue to protect the remaining cartilage. Again, there's no guarantees of that working or anything like that, and obviously you're not going to be growing back any cartilage. But that took that was 6 or 7 weeks on crutches alone, and I've never in my life been on crutches for that length. And that was very challenging and very, very difficult. And then I had to go back throughout the whole rehab process. Then again, going back trying to jog, going back to run, and that was very difficult. That was like 7 months. And at 34 last year, that makes life so much harder. A new baby as well. A lot going on. Obviously, the Offaly role came into play as well. So there was just a lot going on. But I think that injury in particular really opened up my eyes. And even I wasn't overly sure of coming back last September, being truthful. And it was just, I had to come back and get back healthy. And just thankfully, it all fell in line in terms of, okay, I came back and I started feeling a bit better with my body, and I started getting through training sessions and through games. But there's other soft tissue and muscle injuries that are causing me grief as well, between my groin and my hip flexor and my calf. So it's constantly ongoing.
I kind of had a weird sense that maybe lockdown might help somebody in your situation, because the body just rests and recuperates for a little period of time. But actually, I guess that's not really the case. Has it been?
No, not whatsoever. I needed to be in the gym, and I was in the gym in February, March, just tipping away in terms of trying to keep me muscle and my joints strong and keeping the mobility there as much as possible. And I was doing a bit of running even with the Offaly players. I try and jump in for a couple of runs during their training sessions just to keep myself ticking over. And so I was probably hanging on to a tiny string there that I might come back this year. But then I suppose when COVID hit, like that, everything stopped, and I was still going on with my own bit of running and that, but I was having problems with my back as I was doing the running, no physio access, so just it became so much more challenging. And again, I do need to be in a gym, keep my body strong, and obviously that hasn't been the case either. Like I probably won't have gyms back until maybe August, so it would just, I'd have to go through maybe 6 months of rehab, being honest about it, to try and get back to training, and at that there's no guarantee of me actually even coming back.
Is there a little period of mourning now for the end of not being able to play matches?
Not at this moment, no. For me, I think it's always been, and even throughout my injuries, it never hit home until I actually went to a match. when I go to match and I'm standing on the sideline or in the crowd, that's when it hits home, and that's when, you know, kind of emotion pours through. You're thinking, I got to get back, I got to get out there. You know, this is what I'm missing. And so at the moment, obviously, we're in a surreal time with no games, nothing happening. So no mourning, none whatsoever. But it's just that probably that feeling in your gut, really, I suppose, when matches do come back, that's when I probably really will miss it. And especially, obviously, watching the boys play. And again, Colin obviously still playing with the club. I have a load of cousins that are playing with the club, a load of friends there, and not being in those circles is probably going to be difficult as well.
How have you been managing the role of being Offaly manager outside of persuading lads to get involved in the variety show? What have you been doing over the past couple of months to try and keep the connections up?
Yeah, so I think probably similar to most teams, like the first probably 5-6 weeks, we were probably using social media and I suppose technology to keep connected, like the WhatsApp, like the photos when you're going out doing your bit of individual running. If you're getting a bit of your home gym program done as well, it's good to put up a picture just to show like that you are doing it, and just keeping kind of connectivity really within the group. We did a couple of different challenges per week as well. We did a juggling challenge, maybe see who can juggle for 7 seconds. You know, it's probably quite easy for someone who can juggle, but someone who hasn't done it before, it was quite challenging, and probably half the team couldn't do it. Well, couldn't do it initially, but then after 2 weeks of practicing, we got there. So that was quite fun and entertaining. We had a nutrition challenge as well in terms of bake-offs as well. So we had a lot of that going on, and I think for me at 6 weeks we had enough done. And I think if we'd go any longer, I think players would have maybe start getting a bit sick of it. Would have been more draining for them. You know, they're going through a difficult time with work, with family, a lot going on in around that time. So I was very conscious of getting the balance right. And we just literally stopped for 3 weeks, and we had no kind of WhatsApp messages, we had no pictures. I think players needed to switch off. And again, the fear I'd have at Intercounty is the thing becomes very robotic. You want control as well. You want to know what they're doing constantly. But you know, for me, it's kind of like a mini off season there nearly during that period where, look, let's leave them alone. We want them coming back whenever we do come back with an appetite and fresh mentally and physically. And at the moment, the lads are doing a small bit, but obviously this variety show actually is after taking a lot of time. The solo ones after taking a lot of time, and that's become the focus, to be honest, over the last week or two, but which is good. It's normal, it's human, and we're still have that connectivity there, and we're doing something together, and I think that's what's really important. And we're doing something not for ourselves; it's for the people who are vulnerable and people who need that support.
Would you like to be managing a team going into inter-county action this year, perhaps September, October direction?
Yeah, without a doubt. Like I'd love to get back at some stage on it, and I'm conscious of, you know, like when it's right, it's right. You know, I'm not pushing any time frame right at that. Like, you know, the GA and the committee that's looking after the COVID side of things, like they'll let us know in due time. I would, like, you know, if they decided inter-counties come back in 3 or 4 weeks, like obviously I don't, like that would never happen anyway. But like that would give me fear, to be honest, because you can't go from one extreme to another. And I think for me, like if it does happen, the club scene starting off is a great roadmap, because they can get training under their belts, they can start building themselves gradually and start playing matches, and hopefully then the inter-county will kick in maybe later in the year. Like that's how I would love to foresee it happening. And I know there's some rumours going around that that's potentially the way it will happen, and I'm hoping it actually does happen that way.
Yeah, it's looking like it could be a situation where you might have an unbelievable championship where it could be full knockout or something like that. Like, I'm not sure in your position with Offaly if that's something that you would welcome at this point, or how it would view, would it taint it? And then you kind of like throw in the fact that it's going to be played in empty stadiums, obviously, at this point. Has that come into your mind at all, that there was a possibility there earlier in the year that we might not have seen championship being played whatsoever during this calendar year?
Yeah, definitely. Like we're very much in the unknown during March and April in particular, with cases rising, you know, quite fast every week. Like, so I suppose, you know, look, sport was really on the what was the last thing that you were concerned about, to be honest about. So now I think like there is definitely better vibes. There's a better feeling. Numbers are coming down, and yeah, definitely. Whatever the structure is, come September, October, November, whenever that does come back, like, you know, it is the same for everyone else, and I'm happy with that. To be honest, like once we get back playing is the key thing. And like obviously we're in the Christy Ring at the moment. There isn't as many teams in the Christy Ring compared to Liam McCarthy, so we wouldn't have as many games. So I think that would be easier to manage. And if it's a knockout, you know, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest.
Yeah, you could probably get Christy Ring played off over a couple of weeks in comparison to a full championship. Listen, Michael, it's been great chatting to you. Very best of luck on Saturday night. I hope it's a roaring success.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Fingers crossed it will be now. I've no doubt it will be, to be honest. It'll create a lot of laughs tonight. That's the main thing.
I'm sure it will. And make sure to get on and donate. It is the Offaly Hurling Variety Show this Saturday night. There's Michael Fennelly, the hurling manager, on the line. We should say as well that there's been rumours overnight that we're about to see a return to play roadmap published by the GAA. We understand that that's been denied this morning, according to OTB Sports sources. They're saying this morning that reports around dates of an intercounty return are off the wall and that they aren't at that stage yet. We'll have the latest story for you on the OTB Sports app, so plenty to develop there over the next couple of days, to say the least. Right, 9:15 on this Thursday morning on OTB AM. Plenty more to come on the show this morning. The latest episode of Keith Wood's State of the Union is up next with special guests Johnny Murphy and Steve Rooney, where we're focusing on schools and domestic rugby.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Thursday night football with John Giles.
I was talking to somebody about Messi and hasn't won a major. And Ronaldo might. Does that make him a better player? Well, Messi hasn't an opportunity to play in the majors, but they're both great players.
The best analysis of all the week's football from Ireland's #1 football man.
PSG, I thought professionally, were dreadful. Liverpool had that. Liverpool had an honesty about them that PSG didn't have and deserved to win it. It would have been a disgrace, I think, had they not won that particular game.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app. OTB's State of the Union with Keith Wood.
Right, you're very welcome along to this week's episode of Keith Wood's State of the Union. Our guests this week are Stephen Rooney and Johnny Murphy. We're here to talk essentially about the state of the club and amateur and schools game and how that interacts with the professional game. So we're well covered in that regard. Keith, I think everybody's going to be familiar with Johnny's playing career. His coaching career has begun to take off in the last number of years. But Stephen, maybe you might talk to us a little bit about what your role is with regards to club rugby in Ireland and how you got involved.
I was a player at Lansdowne, and then after retiring, had nothing better to do, so I went off and became director of rugby in Lansdowne. So I've been doing that for over 10 years at this stage. And I suppose just of recently, myself and a few other guys representing sort of Leinster clubs have been in talks with the IRFU, together with our Munster counterparts and our Ulster and Connacht counterparts, just discussing the All-Ireland League and discussing, how it can evolve and maybe, change for the better.
He underplays himself a little bit there, Ger. He was a particularly uncomfortable guy to play against, I would have said, back in the day, a long time ago. But also part of what this conversation is that when the game went professional 25 years ago, the clubs pretty much got left behind, and it was very interesting. We spoke last week with Philip Brown, and he gave a great insight into the security or lack therein of the game. And but one of the big fallouts from the game going professional was that the IRFU took, which I still believe is the right decision, to go with the provinces, because they're the only ones with the critical mass to be able to make it into a professional game. And yet I would still have and come from the old idea where schools and club are essential for your improvement and your chance to become a rugby player. And we're still young in a professional sport, but 25 years of the clubs being kind of pushed a little bit out of the way all the time. And I know that Stevens is at the forefront to try and make certain that the club game is brought back up to a level of where it is properly substantial and a proper stepping stone for players that may not get in the academy system, but may kind of be a couple of years later, may get into be playing at a higher level again. But also for the fact that the ethos of the game is built with the schools and with the clubs. So that's the nature of this conversation too.
Stephen, if I was to ask, what do you want? What's the answer to that? Like in an ideal world, what's the outcome for you as a representative of the clubs here in this conversation?
I think really the clubs are possibly just looking for a little more respect, more so than anything in that. All Ireland League Rugby at the minute, at Division 1 level, is a very good product. It's actually a really good standard of play. You've got a lot of young aspiring professionals in the league and that, and you go from week to week, and this is where sometimes the integrity of the league gets called into question, because you're sort of at the mercy of the professional outfits as to who might get released to you from week to week, and that, and and they have their own agendas to follow, and everyone accepts that. But I think from a sponsorship point of view, from a club point of view, having a team which is loaded with 4 or 5 pros one week, and then the same club goes out and plays another team the following week, that doesn't really do the reputation of the league any good. So I think the league is there. The league has evolved, but in itself, it's a very entertaining product. The problem with Irish rugby is, there's only so many rugby games that a rugby fan can watch in one weekend, type of thing, and they'll watch their Pro 14 or their Heineken Champions Cup or whatever it may be, and sometimes the club game gets forgotten about that. So the club game needs to make itself a bit more relevant. It needs to work harder, I think, to sort of get more viewers, more people coming in the gates of the club, helping that, because it is an important part of Irish rugby, and if club rugby were to fall away, I think it would be very detrimental to all levels of rugby in the country, and so it just needs a bit more love, if you like.
Stephen, there's an issue here, and one of them, it's almost a philosophical question as to whether we want the game to just be a professional game. And look, I was fortunate to play in the amateur time and play in the professional time, but also that the nature of rugby, it shouldn't be about 150 professional players in Ireland. It needs to be about what it gives you as a child in school, what it gives you is a sense of community, a sense of camaraderie. So we have a lot of kids stopping playing at 18 or 19, partly because there isn't maybe a pathway. You don't have to be a pathway to play an international or a professional. You don't need to be a professional. But we played the game because we absolutely bloody loved it. There was something fantastic about the game to play, and it was very exciting for us. And we have friends. And we'll have friends for life because of it, both from school. We had a 30 years reunion of my school team, and we met up just before Christmas. And it was fantastic. And I remember them from school, but they're not the memories you have. The memories you have are actually playing rugby and going on the trips with them and getting to know them and getting to understand what team and self-belief and discipline and all those attributes that you get from rugby are. But if the game below professional gets sidetracked completely, I think we miss a huge trick in what makes the game great. So we accept the game has to be professional, but there's an awful lot more than just professional rugby.
Yeah, I just 100% agree with you. That there's, as I say, the friendships, like rugby clubs form a big part of their communities. The club network that is there is hugely important. Guys, like getting on with life or just supporting guys in hard times, and that's all, hugely important. But everyone plays rugby. Like what I'd hate to see is that rugby sort of club rugby gets more and more insignificant, and ultimately fades away, and then we have some sort of American football type scenario where nobody plays rugby after school, other than the professionals. And that would be, as I say, I think that would be hugely detrimental to what's going on. I like at the minute, you have some very good academy systems in Ireland. Leinster, it probably has, is the shining light. But there are a lot of players that have come through club rugby that have come through a difficult route where they didn't, for whatever reason or not, they don't get picked up by the Leinster academy. And they have a different route, and club rugby can provide that route. And I think if you listen to the guys like Noel McNamara from the Leinster Academy, and he speaks very highly of the value of club rugby in terms of preparing his under-20 squad, and giving them, sort of hardening these guys up and giving them the experience at a higher, faster level that they haven't had previous to that.
And I think that's really important in the sense that I know from experience in the school game that there are already a certain amount that don't go forward and play. And under 20s is a fantastic brand of rugby and is really, really enjoyable because you're out in the wider world for your first time, and there's a freedom associated to that, and it can be really, really enjoyable. But I think the main fall off for guys is because some of them might already know that, well, look, I'm probably not going to be professional, but they don't feel that there's probably an attractive enough level for them to play at because of how kind of teenagers and young adults are. They don't see the club game as an attractive level or essentially an attractive product to play in because there's not a huge amount of publicity attached to it. And for kids that are in their senior cup, in their senior cup squad panel of 28, 30, however each school do it, they're a part of this 2-3 month journey that they're in the papers. They're, it's been spoken about on social media, but they know that, well, this is it, because this is going to be, the peak. Where if the club game was a really attractive product and it was seen more and it was out there more, I think they'd have more people continue to play because they're, that's fine, I might not be a pro, but look, geez, I can play this fantastic level and I can play week in, week out I can pit myself against the guys who are going to be professional because they're playing in it when they're not picked for their provinces. I think that's something that there's a trick being missed there, because ultimately we're losing people playing rugby. And whatever level you play, and I say this to all my sixth years when they leave, I'd love to look back in 10 years' time and everyone in this room still be playing, whatever level. It doesn't matter, because rugby gives you values, but it also gives you opportunities at every level. Whether you play in Lansdowne, the Killer Seas or whatever, that those teams that might be the 5th or 6th in the club, but you're having a beer on a Friday night and you're looking for a job after college at 24, 25, someone might give you a job. It creates opportunities, not just in rugby, but outside of rugby. And I think that's really, really important. And it's to keep giving them that opportunity, that it is ultimately it's an attractive product for them to keep playing.
I know it's a different time, and it was a different time, but Garryowen were the route for me to play for Ireland. So I played for Ireland before I played a competitive match for Munster. And it was on the back of performances that we had in the All-Ireland League, because it was, pretty much at its height, or a lot of the 90s was the height of the AIL. But the reason I loved club rugby was I was a front row forward. So that idea of learning your craft, of what to do, of how to scrummage, it's impossible to learn that without playing matches. And for me, that's one of the issues that we have with the academy system. I'd still like to see the players play more rugby. I mean, obviously you need to get them bigger, stronger, and have to be able to take what's going to come down the track when they're going to play at a higher level. But actually, the idea of playing and knowing that you play against a gnarly guy who's 32 or 3 years of age, who knows every trick in the book, and you're 18 or 19, and you have to learn them. And if you don't, it's the best education that you can actually have.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those young players, they have these development programs, and they're great development programs, all mapped out by their academy coaches and everything. But that really needs to be supported by meaningful rugby game time. Ultimately, it's great developing a guy, but there's no substitute for experience, and that is what the All-Ireland League can give you. You've got these young lads going up against men who, as you say, have been around the block and as I say, know every trick in the book and that. So it's a really important part of their development, and it does work. Like, you've got a guy, Ronan Keller, who's now pulling up trees and whatever. A little over a year ago, he was playing All-Ireland League rugby. So particularly for front row forwards as well, it makes a huge amount of sense for these guys to be sort of training or learning their craft, if you like.
And I don't know. Sorry, I don't know enough about the Kelleher situation. How did that come about, and why does that not happen more? Why does everybody not get a set amount of game time in the IAL?
Look, ultimately, this is for the pro guys to really, explain to you. But like ultimately, they, their priority, Leo Cullen's priority as a Leinster coach is his next Pro 14 game or preparing for the next Heineken Champions Cup game. The All Ireland League, as much as he is quite supportive of it, but it's not what he gets paid to do. Okay, so like he has to prepare his team, and Leinster in particular would have a huge amount of international call-ups. So what if you look at the amount of players that Leinster have given debuts to, which is all brilliant, and that is fantastic. They bring through the young players quite quickly, and it's really good to see. What really would annoy a lot of the clubs and things is where you've got a young lad who's maybe been 24th man for the last 3 Pro 14 games because they need the cover there. That's what they need, and as a result, that guy hasn't hasn't been on a rugby pitch in 4 or 5 weeks. Which is, as I say, that's the kind of thing that you want to avoid, and I think part of the discussions that I've been involved with, have been, they've been very positive. Collie McEntee from the IRFU has been, basically trying to come at it a little bit differently from his predecessors, and really, is a big follower of the club game and a big believer in the club game, and he's trying to get everyone to kind of, get a bit of compromise going, so that both the club game and the professional game can benefit from a lot of these younger players getting more game time in the AAL, and the AAL will improve and will be a better product as a result. It'll be more attractive for people to come and watch and that. So, there's been some very positive discussions there, but sorry, Keith.
No, there's a structural component to this, Stephen. So if it's considered that the IRFU need the club game, they then need to tidy up the structure of it, because it went to a stage at about 10 or 12 years ago where it was the All Ireland League all over the whole country for virtually every club that had played rugby. That's not good enough. That's just spreading that senior capacity across the line, whereas you do need to have it some way heightened up into the higher levels to try and have a standard that actually fits, where you get more player into those ones, and then you have proper provincial club competitions underneath that. So there needs to be something consistent that works. It doesn't have to be 10 months of the year. It just needs to be something that's very consistent. But it also fills a hole that doesn't happen. So when you stream a huge amount of kids into academies, everybody else is left behind. You do need to make certain that they have a route through as well. And guys mature at different stages, and we know it. And Johnny, you know that an awful lot. And I think we need to talk a little bit about the schools game as well. But because we can see within the Leinster system, you are just churning out players of quality. Huge numbers every year, and actually they're beginning to spread all over the world now at the present moment in time. What is Leinster doing so right, or what are the Leinster schools doing so right at the present moment in time?
Well, I think in that regard, there's a lot of there's a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes from a Leinster perspective, particularly in this area from 16s up. So they have summer programs, but they have programs that run all year long that are different to when I was playing, and that they now have a real focus on the youths in Leinster. That Trevor Hogan is ahead of that. He's the talent identification officer. Phil Lawler is the head of the domestic game in Leinster, and they have now an elite youth program that stay together and train as a squad all season long. They're not in rugby playing schools. They also have another squad underneath that also play games throughout the season. They don't train as much as the elite guys. I think they're called the YSU. But they're being graded each area, and how you get into the YSP. Sorry, it's YSP. How you get into the YSP is you're being looked at from under 16. So when you come out of third year, you're being looked at. But every area, so the North Midlands, the East Midlands, all those areas in Leinster, I think there's 7, are looking at between, I think, about 80 or 90 kids in that age group. They then get filtered. They go into a program where there's about 200 kids from under 16, and 17s, and then that's developed when they're 18 and 19 into these elite squads. But there's still 70 or 80 youth players being looked at consistently over the whole way. But when you have 100 kids, 150, 200 kids in each area being looked at under 16, they're nearly looking at, between the Shane Horgan competitions, they're nearly consistently looking at, I don't know, 600, 700, 800 kids through, each year, and they then develop forward. But how they're developed then is that the YSP will then play all the top school side. And I think this year, I think the only team to beat the YSP, I think, was St. Michael's. And I could be correct in that. But they beat, they played Blackrock, they played Michael's. They were all really, really tight games. So they're playing the elite schools level, where historically, when I was playing, say, my school team, Newbridge College, would have played the Utes, the Leinster Utes, and it would have been a close game. But that was the overall Leinster Utes. It's developed so much more, and they have, the YDOs are going into youth development officers. They're now going into developing schools. They're going into clubs. Every club in Leinster will have a CCRO, a community club officer, rugby development officer, that will also go into 3 or 4 schools, even into primary schools, secondary schools. So they're looking at absolutely every area. And I've had conversations with a few people, and they said that their job isn't done until they have maybe a professional rugby player from Tala, or a professional rugby player from inner city Dublin, or a non-playing rugby area. So that's ultimately their goal. Now, each province is different in how they approach it, and each province should be different, because one shoe doesn't fit all. So it's like Munster, I think, should be more youth based and have around the clubs, because there's only a few kind of there's not the same amount, but maybe doing a county rugby team similar enough to splitting them out. Leinster are doing it, splitting them into areas by each county, and having a county rugby officer that starts looking at kids and developing the programs through the CCR program. But again, it's very difficult to do, because people are now trying to copy what Leinster are doing. But that doesn't fit everywhere, because they don't have the same population, don't have the same playing numbers.
But from that, Johnny, what percentage of those guys are getting through to getting Leinster contracts, senior contracts?
Oh, there's only a small percentage. The percentage is still the same.
So this is something that's going to pay dividends, that Leinster would hope in 5, 6, 10 years' time, that this is a pathway that's built up within it. And I know Munster are doing something similar, albeit on a much smaller scale with it. But for me, I wanted to go back onto the schools component part of it. So the senior schools in Leinster have very professional coaching staffs. There's a lot of money invested within that side of it. But the amount of players that are coming out of that system there's huge numbers every year.
Yeah, well, I'm in Newbridge College. Our program, some people won't like me saying it, but our players are essentially professional rugby players for 9 months of the year, built around school time. So they'll have 3 weight sessions. They'll be in for weights in the morning at 7:00 on a Monday morning. There could be a review potentially during the day or before, or we have remote reviewing capacity and huddle. So I can tag a game and send clips to individual players. We'll train on a Monday afternoon. Monday morning, then Tuesday morning they'll have weights again. We could have another review during the day. We'll be back on the pitch Wednesday. They'll be off. Thursday, then we'll play. We'll weights again. More rugby, team run, play Saturday, and that's essentially, it's built around, like, we've a physio that's he's not full time, but he's a past pupil, but they can call at any stage. We have a strength and conditioner, full-time strength and conditioner that looks after the whole school, and he does hockey as well. We have, I suppose I'd be classed as a full-time employee from a rugby perspective, and then, you know, I have a forwards coach, a defence coach. You know, the juniors the same. The juniors have an attack defence coach, and each year has individual coaches, head coaches, assistants through the whole way. Like, we have our current second years. There's 5 coaches, 3 external out of the 5, 2 externals in first year with 3 or 4 members of staff. TY is all external, 2 external coaches at TY. The SET is, there's only 1 member of staff and the others are all external coaches. So that's the level, and you're essentially running a professional program within a school, and there's a pathway for 6 years.
Within that system, are many of those volunteer? Are they all?
Oh no, they are. Yeah, there's all are being paid. If you're a staff member, then there's obviously a small bursary on top that you can get, but there's a pro rata for each session, and then there'd be 1 or 2 that would be above that would be essentially full time.
It's an extraordinary system.
And like, we're not like, we have to, like, we don't have a full-time director of rugby. There's 4 or 5 of those in other schools. We are moving to that, but it's going to take a length of, you know, a period of time. But yeah, like, we are not where we should be, and we've done reviews during COVID to show that, and we're still not where we need to be if we want to repeat what we did this year and continue that way. So yeah, we'd be classed as probably a development a development program, in the sense that we're trying to develop to reach where Michael's, Blackrock, Gonzaga to a certain extent, Mary's have a full-time DOR, and, you know, to really try and push where they are, you know.
And does the school finance the whole thing independently, or do Leinster or the IRFU pay anything along the way?
It's independent. There's some stuff, fundraisers in terms of past pupils, and that would be involved, but it's part of the school that pay for that.
It's handy for Leinster to have such an academy system, handing them players at 17 and 18.
Yeah, they do help. Like, you can get as much help as you want, but it's not, you know, they don't, like, so we've run testing days where Leinster have come in and seen where we're at. They have our data compared to other schools that they were allowed into. They'll drop in terms of your medical protocols. You know, anything that you want from a Leinster perspective is there, but they don't have any direct funding. It's support. And I actually think that that's something that could be really helpful in the club game as well, is that provincial support being released to the clubs as well. But again, it's manpower to an extent.
Stephen, right, saying you don't have any age, you don't have teams kind of in the age group for players who would be playing in schools. Is that true about most rugby clubs?
Traditionally, that was always the case with Leinster clubs. Now, it's changed a fair bit in the last while. You've seen a lot of Dublin clubs are sort of trying to expand their youth sections, but if you're in an SCT squad and you may not be playing first rugby, you could never pull on a jersey for the first team in school. But you're named in that SCT squad, then you are you're not allowed to play with your club. You're not allowed to play club rugby for that period of time, which can be a frustration for a lot of guys, and it's certainly a frustration for some of the clubs where you've done a job in sort of bringing these guys up from under 8s through to probably under 13s or so, and then they go missing for 3 or 4 years. Probably that connection that they have with the club is, I wouldn't say broken, but it's certainly weakened considerably. So there's less when these guys come out of school, then that they feel less part of the club. So that's just that's an offshoot of this kind of very sophisticated school system that Leinster clubs have.
There is a school's youth designated time frame, but that's generally in TY, where you can play a school's youth side. But as Rue said, for instance, I had 3 TYs in my squad, in my training squad. Now, I think one was a starter, but the other 2 probably accumulated a small amount of game time, and only in friendlies, but would have been with us for 3 months of the year. He wasn't allowed to play for his club. Regardless of whether I wanted him to or not, he's just not allowed. And if he did play, and then there'd be repercussions from a obviously rules and regulations standpoint. But in my opinion, he should be allowed to play. I think it should be, they would be able to. Now, it's an administration issue to be fair, that if he wasn't involved in my 23, that he was allowed to play the school's youth Saturday or Sunday. He should be allowed to play on a Sunday with his club if he wanted to. But there is a huge amount of administration, because every rugby playing school has to send in those every week then,
And there is that sort of situation goes on in Munster. It is actually one of the, I would say, fallout elements from the game going professional as well. There was a bit of a change in terms of different elements with that. I love the association with the club, although I didn't start with Eoin until I left St. Munchin's, and they then became my club going forward afterwards. But maybe there could be a sort of end of season competition, or a sevens competition, or something that keeps the link. So the idea of building up a guy from 5 or 6 years of age to going to school at 12 or 13 and then not seeing him for 4 or 5 years, there's something inherently wrong in that. But more so than that, actually, the big issue is we should never say no to a kid playing rugby.
Yeah, exactly.
So if a kid is in a squad and he can't get into the team, but he's a good player, and some of these teams have got 25 good players, 30 good players, so he could be very, very good. There has to be a route. There has to be not just one rule that covers everything. You should never say no to a kid going to play rugby at any stage. And at times we've had issues with that in Munster in a big way. So guys are trying to leave clubs because they don't have a team at under 15 or under 16, and they'd like to go and play there, but they often don't get allowed to go and play. You can't move clubs until you're 18. You can go on loan. So there's issues with all of that side of it as well. So I do think that, again, a lot of that comes from leadership. A lot of that comes from the IRFU directing what it actually wants to be done. And a lot of cases, especially for the club game, it's been left on its own. It hasn't become something that's been central. And in terms of the schools, if the schools keep churning out the players at the amount that they're doing, and the schools' parents are paying for it, they don't really need to worry about that either. They don't want to kind of mess with too much there, because an awful lot of quality is coming through the school system.
I think the other byproduct of the school system, and sorry, it's a good problem to have, is but you have a lot of kids coming out of school who are very good rugby players. Particularly, we've spoken about the Leinster clubs and or Leinster schools, but as Johnny says, the reality is only a very small percentage of these guys will make it through into the academies and hopefully on to professional careers after that. Now, there's probably quite a significant percentage that ultimately could be good enough to play, to play higher at a higher level, but for whatever reason they don't get the letter from the Leinster Academy getting them in. So all of a sudden their hopes are dashed, and they just turn away from rugby completely. And that's where the clubs can really sort of step in and help these guys and get them back, back on a route. And, like certainly, Lansdowne, amongst lots of other clubs, have seen, guys take a more indirect route towards professional rugby. Because, I mean, ultimately, I would imagine the IRFU want as big a base of players to pick their national teams from as they can. So if you've got young guys with potential giving up because, the Leinster kind of door has been shut on them or whatever, then, that's not going to serve the game very well going forward either. So, I think it's an issue. It's another reason why, the club rugby needs to be there and to help these guys, push.
Rue, would you see a national under-21s competition, club competition? Would you see that as being a stepping stone, either to reignite your love of the game and maybe copper fasten an association with the club, or it might give you the extra little bit of rugby that you could play after school, something to aim for?
Well, you've got the Fraser McMullen Cup, which is under 20s. Now you have to qualify for that. You have to kind of come through your provincial league and qualify through it. Ulster don't participate in it. Connacht are part of the Leinster under 20s setup. So to be honest, it's usually dominated by probably 3 or 4 teams in Leinster. I think the reality is that the All Ireland League, the age profile in the All Ireland League is very young. So it's come down hugely since you or I ever, were playing. So a lot of the guys that are playing are sort of, anywhere between 19 and 23, 24. The guys, the 30-year-olds playing are less and less. And I think, that's probably, I don't think that's peculiar to Ireland alone. I think that's just the nature of the sport and natures of economies and things like that. But, I think to separate the under 21s from the AAL, possibly, there's merit in having the competition, but I think if you focus this and channel these young players through into the All Ireland League itself, you'll be achieving that. But to have, for the guys that don't quite make it there, I think the under 20s competitions are brilliant because it takes guys a while to develop and to find their feet. In school, the school system is very professional. Everything's laid out to the players on a plate like that. They don't even really have to think about it. Almost, it's all there. Whereas school at clubs level, all of a sudden you become an adult. You've got to do a bit of growing up. You've got to take on a bit more responsibility yourself. Sometimes it takes guys a bit of time to manage that.
And I think that is something that the actual clubs themselves can manage, is that, have an emphasis on under 20s and make it clear that their protocols are that if you're not picked for the AIL side, then you play with your peer group for 2 years, which is under 20s. And it affords you to grow a bit more, playing a really good standard. Like, I think the Premier 20s in Leinster certainly, they would have the capability of competing probably at Division 2A in terms of AIL standard. I think the physicality would probably get the better of them over a period of the season. But I do think it's important for a guy who still has a bit of development to go, that knows that if he's not good enough to play AIL, well, that's fine. On a Sunday, I'm going to be playing with my mates who are, the same age, similar enough size, and I'm having really good crack. So it's a way of keeping that level, that age group of guys coming forward, where if he can go into J1s or even J2s, he's playing against adults, and that can get a small bit fed up with that because he's essentially losing contact with his mates. So I think that is something that the club themselves could take responsibility for, that it's, their rules, for the want of a better word, or if you're not picked in the AIL squad, well, away you go and you play 20s, play with your mates for the weekend.
Yeah.
So sorry, Premier 20s is obviously the under 20s. Who does every club have an under 20 team, and they would play in the Premier 20 league? Is that
No, you kind of qualify and then it's ranked. But yeah, most teams will have and will try their very best, and then it's ranked like any AIL competition or any Leinster competition. So Premier, Div 1, Div 2, and so on.
Okay, but your junior teams would tend to pick up players who want to play senior rugby, who don't make the senior team, and they would tend to go to the junior team as opposed to the under 20s because you've outgrown it in some ways.
Yeah, and then junior clubs also try and have like the local, Newbridge, they have an under 20s. Kildare in our local area have under 20s. They play in a cup competition, but also have the potential to qualify into the main 20s league. So there is opportunity for 18, 19, 20-year-olds to play together for 2 years at their level. It's just to make sure that the clubs are allowing them to do that and not necessarily playing against J1s or J2s who are adults.
Steve, again, pardon my ignorance here. Are there players who are semi-professional playing in the IAL, and how many semi-professionals would there be? How do they get financed?
So the league itself is an amateur league. Okay, so the only guys that are officially getting paid are the guys who are with the different academies, or who are they're development players, or young guys in the provinces who for one reason or another aren't getting games or maybe coming back from injury. So then you've also then got a mix of kind of guys who've hung up their boots professionally and are back, and maybe they've kind of realigned with their club and they're trying to kickstart their career. So for example, Mark Flanagan joined us last season, having played in the UK and then having played with Leinster and Munster in Ireland and he's come back and he's an engineer now. So it's a good mix of talent, but like the league itself, the RFU are very strict on it. It's strictly speaking is an amateur league. Whether everybody adheres to that or not, that's a whole other debate. But
okay,
one of the parts on that I would have always said was a joy as a young guy. So it's a long time since I played All-Ireland League, and I started when I was 19 playing All-Ireland League. And but if you looked around the room, you had bankers, you had builders, you had accountants, you had students, you had engineers, you had people in every walk of life. And it was one of the great things you say about Limerick, that it was everybody played. It was a game for everybody. It wasn't elitist at all. And what was the joy within that changing room was that you had different perspectives. I mean, it was about independent thought. Everybody viewed it differently. So one of the issues when you go into, I'm going to say, a Leinster school that is at that level of organisation, that this is how things are done, which is brilliant for enhancing an athlete and bringing an athlete to a higher level, is that if you bypass the club side, you bypass different opinions. You bypass different ways of doing things. This is a regimented view of doing it. We do want independent thinkers in it as much as possible. And actually, that's where a lot of kids fall by the wayside leaving school. Everything isn't laid on for them. And some don't like that. But some thrive in it, and some suddenly have an awful lot more to offer when they come out at the end of it. It's something that the clubs actually do give a lot. We're getting close towards the end of this. How has the lockdown, how has that affected both the school and the club? If we go club first, Stephen, how much pressure are you under?
I think it's put a huge financial strain on clubs all around the country. So essentially since March, when all rugby activities ceased and whatever, all your revenue and your streams of revenue, whether they be match gates or whether they be bar revenue or whether they be events that you run in the clubhouse and whatever, that's all just completely gone. It's a rugby club. It's not a business that puts money aside, whatever. So clubs probably have a little bit of short-term finance that they can that can get them through. And you've seen I think there's a lot of GoFundMe pages up with various different clubs reaching out to their members and their diaspora or whatever to try and get them through what's a difficult financial time. But I think, to be honest, I think the whole COVID thing brings a lot of opportunity, because amateur club rugby is obviously sort of suffering, but professional rugby has come to a standstill as well. There's a huge question mark over what games can be played and what competitions can be run. So, is the Celtic Cup going to happen this year? If the Celtic Cup doesn't happen, I think it's a great opportunity for the clubs and the professional setups to maybe forge a kind of closer and stronger relationship. And these guys who need rugby, these young players who would normally play in the Celtic Cup, and that's at least 8 games of their season, that would provide them with some meaningful sort of proper rugby, in order to hone their skills and help prep them for whatever lies ahead of them. So I always try and look at the opportunities and things, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. I say all it needs, and that's something you can do without any added expense. I don't know what it costs to field a Celtic Cup set a team or a match or whatever, but I know that the infrastructure with the All Ireland is already there, so that the cost is barely zero. So I think that's, for me, that if that comes to pan out or whatever, that some of these pro competitions are, as I say, getting cancelled or whatever, and pro rugby players need rugby, then the clubs can step in and provide that. And I think, as Johne spoke about, maybe there's an opportunity then for the professional coaches to come in and liaise with the clubs and show, well, this is how we'd approach doing this or whatever, and just bring their knowledge to bear and pass it down to the clubs. I mean, there are the clubs have a lot of good coaches as it is, but everyone can learn more. Everyone can learn how to do things better. So sorry, I'm rattling on a bit, but that's it's a difficult time though. And everyone, nobody's sort of avoiding, everybody's health is absolutely paramount. So clubs won't be going back until it's absolutely safe for everybody to do that. But we want to make sure that there are clubs to go back to. I know the professional game has taken huge hits on that, but I would imagine there'll be some clubs around the country that simply just won't survive this. Or if they do, it'll be because there's been a huge amount of work from their members and that. So it's difficult.
From a school perspective, it remains to be seen, based on obviously fees and probably how the whole thing is going to affect the economy as a whole. Really, I suppose one of the added extras and a lot of why parents choose private schools is the extracurricular activities that can be afforded for their kids and the varying options that they have. So I think it's important that it does go forward. For us at the moment, we are planning. I've been in constant contact with next year's group. They're on a break now, and they'll start again, probably remotely on their own in July, and we'll plan from them. But we're in a bit of a holding pattern. But as is for us, I think overall the private school sector is probably just going to have to wait and see how it is really affected in terms of in terms of numbers. And I suppose the principals that have been through the previous recession a couple of years ago probably have an idea of where things have to get managed and that. But from our side, we're trying to continue on as normal and trying to keep the lads active. I think following on from what Roo said in terms of the club stuff, it's really important that the club is ultimately it's a community asset, and I think that it is that it is supported. And I think clubs, if they have walkways and they have different things, the opportunity to open the facilities up for the local people can also bring in new members. Obviously, all done in a really safe way and under government guidelines. But the opportunity for the clubs of all sports to show off what facilities they have, and that to show that they really are there for the community, and without the community they won't be there anymore. So I think it is really important that when they can and when it's safe, that every club tries to show off the facilities that they have and try and get the community out and active. And I think that's one of the big things, the amount of activity that has happened, and people are way more active. Hopefully this will, and I suppose the weather plays a huge amount in that, but hopefully this will be kind of a catalyst for people that haven't tried sports to try them, to pick them up, all sports. And I think that hopefully that can be a positive out of it, that our society as a whole is going to be more active. And you see Australia, how active they are, but also their volunteerism doesn't drop, and people are engaged at clubs and they drive things forward in their community. So hopefully we can follow suit there.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. Keith, I'll give the last word to you on this. How hopeful are you that the right blend of relationship between the elite amateur game, the amateur game, and the professional game can be found?
I don't think it's been found in the last 10 years, actually. I think some parts of it have gone well. I think we are getting a lot of players through different systems, but not through all systems. I think if you were to look at rugby, traditionally, it was built on clubs, schools, and the international team. And so for that, you could put in the professional game for it is now. But it still needs to be clubs, schools, and professional rugby. And at the present moment in time, the clubs are not getting enough love. There isn't enough structure for them to be able to build on top of it. I think it's a very difficult time at the present moment in time. I do take Stephen's point of view that if certain things are changed because of competitions that can't be played, can the clubs fill that hole? And if they fill that hole, why wouldn't they be filling that all the time going forward? So I think there is a route for it, but it requires people to get around the table to make that route work and happen. In terms of the schools, what Leinster are doing is truly extraordinary. I didn't want to ask on air exactly what you think your budget would be for your school programme, because I think that would be a bit harsh. But I'd love to have that discussion again, because I know that in lots of schools, in St. Munchin's, my own school, for example, which is not a fee-paying school, they don't pay their coaches at all, actually. So there isn't a professional programme that's set in there. They still do pretty well. They have a couple of junior cups over the last few years, and they're very keen on not paying them. They actually love the idea of this being a volunteer and of a teacher-driven system. But that's a particular system as well, and who's to say that's right, wrong, or indifferent, or that Johnny's is. But there does need to be more done to try and help all the schools in the different areas that are not done on a fee-paying model to be able to promote higher standards within those schools, and support would have to come from the RFU for that. So we had Philip Brown on last week, and Philip Brown is saying, well, without the professional game, we don't have anything to do with the amateur game. We're struggling very, very heavily. So I think it's a difficult number of years ahead of us. But the only way ever through any of that level of difficulty is talk, is conversation. Get around a table and see what can actually happen. And you're going to lose something. I mean, they say the art of compromise is that absolutely nobody is happy. The clubs will lose something, the schools might lose something, the RFU might lose something. None of them might be happy with it, but it may be a workable system going forward.
Right. On that note, our guest this week were Stephen Rooney and Johnny Murphy. Another Keith Wood State of the Union is in the books. Hopefully it has provoked some conversation anyway. We'll see you next week. Thanks a million.
OTB's State of the Union with Keith Wood.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Sunday